Release that witch eye by Ermo. Chapter 561, The Magic Power of Blood. Agatha was relieved when Roland and the woman finally left. Was I being too much just now? Perhaps I should be more kind towards the Lord even in the face of a common people. After all, 400 years have passed, the world is different now. Despite these thoughts, she still did not like non-witches entering the laboratory where the sigil was produced, and she did not want His Majesty to know the method of making the sigil. Of course, the latter would soon be revealed. Agatha turned around to set up the 6 square wooden boxes she had prepared in the morning and inserted the god stones of retaliation His Majesty collected into them. It was the template for making the sigil base. For sigils of listening, a sigil of screaming and a sigil of observing were what she needed to make. As she had expected, His Majesty did not choose any combat sigils, but instead, He chose the basic supplementary sigils in accordance with the magic stones in hand. The action of using high-quality magic stones left by a super magic to make the sigil of screaming and the sigil of observing was considered a waste in the Quest Society. Now that Roland possessed powerful firearms, the demand for the combat sigils was of course, not as strong. Not to mention that the stronger the sigil was, the more magic power would be required. A knocking sound came from outside the shed again. It seemed that in addition to an independent research tower, she would also need a few servants. Agatha reluctantly put down the magic stone in her hands and opened the wooden door. "What's the matter, Your Majesty? Anything else?" "Thank you for waiting, Miss Agatha." Do you need me to treat the demon again?" It was Anna and Nana entering this time. They were the assistants Agatha had requested from Roland. "No." Ahem, she corrected herself and said, "You're just in time. I've just finished screening. Let's put the materials into the boxes, and then we can officially start the production." When the bright blue blood flew into the wooden box through the coated flexible tube, some incredible changes began to happen to the god stones. When the blood dripped onto the stones, a series of bubbles emerged. Like a burning candle, the corner areas of the hard stones were melted into sticky liquid flowing down from the stones, revealing the god stones themselves. The demon was desperately struggling, exhausting the very last effort it had left as if it was aware of what they were doing. Unfortunately for it, the struggle was futile under the confinement of the solid iron chain. Soon, the 6 boxes were filled with the blood of the mad demon. The first box looked as if it were boiling. The surging liquid was mixed with fine sand, mercury, and the god stone, looking sticky and muddy. Anna carefully observed the changes and asked, "Does the raw materials affect the quality of sigil?" "Yes, it mainly depends on the god stone of retaliation and the magic power of blood." The Quest Society thought that the magic power transformed all aspects of the body. The physical quality of senior witches was apparently better than that of ordinary witches. Moreover, the transcendents had achieved their limitation at this point. In order to improve the efficiency of the sigil, we would try our best to choose the blood of the strongest demon and the god stones of the best quality to make better sigils. For example, Lady Alice's god sigil of retaliation was completed with the blood of a dying super magic on the battlefield. Will the same happen when a witch's blood merges with the god stone? Not the same. The god stone won't melt like a candle and the reaction won't be as intense. The liquid formed can flow freely like water now. However, the demon's blood will eventually solidify and become as hard as stone. Agatha said while inserting a piece of separating panel into the wooden box. Therefore, the process of making sigil is similar to melting metal. Before it's completely solidified, we have to embed the magic stones and complete the most crucial step, connecting the magic vein. Vein? Anna was curious. Like a plant? Agatha nodded. Remember what I said previously? The Quest Society thought that only life could carry magic power, and without the magic vein, a sigil will only be a dead object. The magic stones would still be individual entities but would not jointly produce the incredible power after the combination. Does this mean that the demon's blood can give these ordinary substances life? She asked in surprise. It doesn't happen with the demons alone. Agatha calmly answered, we need a witch's blood as well. Nana was shocked. She covered her mouth with her hands. The Quest Society only discovered this secret by accident. Mixing the witch's blood with the demons would produce a strange effect, keeping the melted god's stone alive, like a plant. The vein would not lose the effect of magic power even if it was left aside for a long time. I'm not sure how to describe it. Anyway, you'll understand when you see it. The first box of liquid had cooled down, revealing a layer of grayish light. It looked like condensed blue wax oil. Agatha removed the panel, leaving 2 hemispherical grooves and a strip of shallow groove in the box. Then she picked up the knife on the table and slid it across her wrist. The bright crimson blood gushed out thickly, filling up half of a wine glass. She said to the little girl, "Help me heal the wound, please." This was the reason Agatha had chosen both of them. Anna had the best learning ability within the Union. She was suitable for the inheritance of the skill, and Nana could help to effectively reduce Agatha's pain. Healing witches were the main forces of the frontline combat in Tequila. It was impossible to arrange for any of them to support the Quest Society. Most of the time, the laboratory could only use herbs to treat the wounds after releasing blood. If it were not for the hope of defeating the demons Roland Wimbledon showed her and the unbiased treatment to all the witches, she would rather bury the method of the sigil making for good. The fact that the witch's blood could be perfectly blended into the demon's blood was unacceptable to most people even in the Union. Even with her personal exposure to this matter, she had once suspected the origins of witches. Such confusion was very detrimental to the battle of divine will. Thus, the making of sigil was one of the secrets that the members of the Union had strictly kept. She did not want His Majesty to participate in the observation for this reason. Especially there were the rumors about witches being minions that had fallen into the demon's seduction. Agatha hoped to delay the time when Roland would find out, even though he would find out sooner or later. It's probably a self-delusion. She secretly sighed to herself. When the mixture was semi-hard, Agatha embedded the magic stone into the groove and poured her warm blood onto it. The crimson blood was flowing within the shallow groove, and the cobalt-toned blood clots surrounding it started to wriggle. The edge of both gradually blurred, forming into an interpenetrated form. After that, she injected magic power into the sigil. Suddenly, the red-colored bloodline projected fine rays of light, and numerous light spots were flowing within the vein. It was rhythmically expanding and shrinking with wriggling movements, as if it were breathing. Anna and Nana understood the meaning of Agatha's words at the same time. The sigil had come alive. Chapter 562, The Witnesses. So, was it successful? Anna softly asked. Yes. Then, it should be cut and sealed within the silver foil. Agatha nodded and said, the final step is different depending on the type of sigil. For example, the sigil of screaming should not be cut as it would be used a whole. What will happen if we fail? The bloodlines won't be able to collect the magic power for some unknown reason. There's always a chance of this happening no matter how good the materials are. The solution is pretty simple as well. We just need to pry the magic stone off and redo it. But it'd consume the blood, Anna frowned. That's why the demon's blood was considered more precious than the witch's blood in Tequila. Agatha self-deprecatingly smiled. No one cared if the witch's blood was wasted during an experiment. But we would be scolded and punished if we wasted demon's blood. There were 2 sigils that failed out of the 6 in the end. Although the steps were completely the same as before, 2 of the bloodlines did not respond to the magic power injection. In other words, they did not come alive. Agatha pried off the magic stones and took the reserved wooden box out to continue the second production. She had to hurry up since the demon was almost dead. The alien that was fixed to the wooden table started having irregular spasms, and the black-blue colored skin started to gradually turn gray. The excessive blood loss had caused its breathing to become intensively, and the red mist below its helmet had obviously faded. Once the mist had been exhausted, the demon would die shortly after, and the blood would only last for about 15 minutes past death. Wait a minute. Anna stopped her when Agatha raised the knife. Use my blood. Anna had already cut the skin on her wrist open with her black fire when Agatha was about to object. Nana can heal the wound, but she cannot replenish the blood. His Majesty has mentioned that losing too much blood could cause dizziness and you may even pass out. It'd not be beneficial to you or your experiment. Of course, it'd be best for you to rest for a few days before resuming your practices and productions. You'll recover faster if you eat more meat porridge and liver during your recuperation. Is that what His Majesty said? Yes, every witch had to attend the injury self-help class, Anna said with a smile, and the main reason you selected me as your assistant was for me to learn the method of sigil making, wasn't it? It's better for me to operate these too. Agatha kept quiet for a moment and said, in that case, thank you. You're welcome, she gently said, I'm very interested in it as well. The witch empire was split apart and completely disintegrated after the demon's attack. The people who survived traveled across the mountains and crossed the river to the wild places to rebuild the city. This is the third time, as well as the very last approach for us to prepare for the battle of the divine will. It has become the truth of history. With these words, Roland quietly observed Edith's expression with his chin propped on his hand. The afternoon sun streamed into the room, shedding a touch of glory in front of the desk. The lady in deep contemplation looked just like a statue, and her green-colored hair reflected a pale white color in the sunlight. Her beautiful face did not even show the slightest change at hearing the frightening news, but instead, Edith's eyes showed more of an excitement and curiosity as Roland had expected. She kept quiet for a while and slowly said, You wouldn't try to fool me by fabricating such an incredible story. Are the demons really that powerful? There's no doubt. Each of them is an aggressive individual and there are an astonishing number of them. My army could easily defeat Timothy's knightage, but they cannot necessarily defeat the demons. After all, they've been lurking around the northwest region of the Land of Dawn, unlike the witches who will need to start from scratch. The most important danger is that there'll be no negotiating for this battle, and it won't end until one of the two parties is destroyed. In that case, are you planning to break the news to everyone? Sooner or later. Roland sighed. But not now. I'm not sure how the people will respond regarding the horrible and ruthless alien enemy, and building confidence is a slow process. I agree with you. Panic is indeed scarier than any enemy, Edith nodded and said, I've one last question. How far away from us is the Battle of Divine Will? 5 years or sooner? Nobody knows the exact time the bloody moon will arrive. I can only say that the war may break out at any time, and thus, I'm not able to slowly unify the kingdom of Grey Castle little by little. She did not answer but stood up from her seat and kneeled down onto one knee and said, In this case, the Comte family is willing to be at your service. Your law will not be unimpeded in the north and your order will be the only voice there. She stopped for a moment and then said, I also hope that all of your promises are honored. Are you still thinking about the steam engine plant? Roland shook his head and smiled. Your father may not necessarily agree with that, and what can the Comte family guarantee with? Me, she said without hesitation. What? Your Majesty, I'm the guarantee. If you're still worried about it, Cole can stay here as well. Edith spoke with confidence. In this case, my father would have to agree even if he is unwilling to. You're saying you'll stay in the city of Neverwinter as a hostage? Although Roland meant to do just that, speaking it out loud still made him feel slightly embarrassed. Isn't that a threat in disguise in the eyes of the Duke? Not as a hostage, she saluted in a knight's manner with a hand covering her chest. Please allow me to join your city hall, I'd like to witness the new world you have planned. Roland received 6 of the newly made sigils that night. Thank you for all of your hard work. He looked at Agatha and nodded. Did the process go well? We failed twice with the first batch and Anna also participated with part of the making process. Agatha yawned and said, Anyway, if you want me to make more sigils, please give me a spacious independent laboratory instead of a simple shabby stable-like shed. I owe you a spellcaster's tower, Roland happily responded. Nightingale stuck her head out from behind Roland's back after the ice which left the office and said, What's the use of these sigils? They're probably the equivalent of a phone, alarm, and camera? What are they for? You'll know after you try it, Roland said with a smile. It was a pretty productive day today. The sigils of listening would temporarily solve the challenges of transmitting long-distance messages. Although they were scarce and could only be used by witches, they were still better than entirely depending on a carrier pigeon. The sigil of screaming tweeted at a high pitch when it sensed demon power, and it also effectively suppressed any of the enemy's sneak attacks, and the area of coverage was about the size of the border area. The sigil of observing could assist with Thunder's adventure plan. It would be a pity for Roland to miss the spectacular and strange sealing since he was unable to follow the fleet out to sea. Of course, what pleased Roland the most was Edith Const's pledge of allegiance. Nothing was sweeter than the extra population and the added resources. If the North was really offering their comprehensive service to him, Roland's actual control of the territory would be doubled, and the excessive power of the nobles at the eastern region would feel the pressure. If everything went well, he might be able to accomplish the great reunification before the arrival of the months of demons this year. Chapter 563, Joan. The swirling sea, the fjords islands. A mist began to rise over the sea, making them feel like they were sailing through the clouds. Shortly after they left Snowwave Island, it was out of sight, except for a vast expanse of whiteness. It looked as if the island had never existed. Only the splash of the water hitting on the bottom part of the ship let Margaret, who now found it hard to tell their location in the mist, know they were still moving forward. Sailors considered sailing in misty weather a taboo. Usually, if a captain asked them to do so, they would tie him up and throw him into the sea. They would always, however, follow Thunder's orders, since he was not only the captain of the chase but also the most famous explorer of the fjords. No matter where Thunder wanted to go, be it a bottomless pit or a stream of lava deep inside a volcano, he would always be able to recruit some people willing to follow him. "Captain, the dark reef area is just in front of us," shouted a sailor, who was familiar with the underwater terrain here. "Lower the sails and slow down," said Thunder while clapping his hands. "Attention, everybody. That's our destination. Prick your ears up and keep your eyes open to watch the water around us." "Yes," they chorused. Since Thunder secretly met His Majesty in the King's city of Grey Castle and got Roland's support, he had not wasted a single day to prepare for his third travel to the Shadow Islands. In order to explore the secret sea lane and tides, he needed a suitable ship, outstanding explorers, and more importantly, a witch who could observe the tides below the sea. The witch he wanted was Joan, a childhood friend of Margaret. "Are we really going to find her here?" Molly stood on the magic servant's head and looked around and added, "I see nothing at all. Joan only appears when we're in trouble. She won't just turn a blind eye to a ship that's going into a dangerous area," Margaret said in a low voice. She had transformed into a fish now? "The last time I saw her, only her legs had changed into a fishtail, but it was over 10 years ago." "I'm not sure how she looks like now," Margaret answered while shaking her head. "It's a type of summoning magic ability. She can transform into any animal in the sea. If she's lived in the sea for all those years as you said, she must have passed the day of awakening smoothly. But as so many years have passed, is it true that she's still in this sea?" Camilla Derry, chief chamberlain of the Sleeping Island, said after a thought. "My lady, please trust us. Since I knew she was a witch, I've kept a close eye on this sea. Her singing voice is the symbol of Snowwave Island, and I've heard that some merchants attracted by it even desired to capture and keep her," Thunder said with a smile. "Did you stop them?" Camilla asked, raising her eyebrow. "A shipwreck stopped them, and no one dares to do that again." "I promise," Thunder answered and blinked at her. "I see. Thank you for helping the witches," she said with her hand on her chest. "Thanks, Uncle," added Molly. "Haha, I look that old to you?" Thunder touched his beard, and said, "It's not very long." Seeing this, Margaret, who stayed by his side, shook her head at the fact that he was still popular among girls. She knew on any island of fjords, he was the most popular man, and that was why he won her affection. She thought it was a pity since he had his daughter Lightning, he had given up the idea of starting another marriage. "Boss, I seem to hear a singing voice." In the northwest, shouted someone suddenly, in the stern of the ship. "Be quiet, everybody." Thunder and the witches simultaneously run to the stern of the sailing ship, followed by Margaret. Everyone held their breath and listened attentively. The tenuous, vacant singing voice gradually became clearer. It came from a certain direction instead of reverberating all around, acting like a beam of light coming through the thick mist to guide the chase to a safe route. Reef the sails and drop the anchor. Put the landing shuttle down in the sea. Thunder ordered. Ever since Joan awakened and became a witch, she always remained hidden to avoid being caught by anybody. As she guided the ships in distress with only her voice, very few people had seen her before. Given that, Thunder planned to let the chase lay at anchor to attract Joan. Meanwhile, he took the witches and Margaret on a small boat to trace her by following her voice. The magic servant dove into the water to carry the landing shuttle forward, saving the trouble of paddling. They traveled in the thick mist for less than 10 minutes, and then Margaret suddenly saw a green figure in the sea. Joan, she could not help but shout loudly. The singing voice promptly stopped. They saw a girl floating in the water while revealing only her upper body above the surface. She stared at the people in the boat and seemed at a loss. Her eyes widened in surprise, and her skin was pale white as if she hardly exposed herself to the sunlight. Her hair was like fluffy seaweed, hanging down to cover half of her face, but they could still see some markings like scales on her cheek and neck. "It's me, Margaret. Do you remember me?" Yeah. The girl made some intermittent sounds. "It's no use. She hasn't talked to people for too long. She can't speak now." Thunder interrupted decisively. "Now, let's leave this communication problem to you, Lady Camilla." Camilla nodded and then put her hand on Margaret's shoulder. Instantly, Margaret heard what Joan said in her head. "Are you bringing them here to catch me?" "No, I come here too." "Say it in your heart." "She can hear you that way and it's more sincere to communicate with your heart." Camilla interrupted. Margaret swallowed to calm down, thinking about what she should say. "You once saved my life. Joan, do you remember? I come here to ask for your help." After a long while, Margaret heard Joan once again. "I remember you, Margaret. We often played together in the past." Amazed by what was happening, Margaret was lost in thought. This is the ability of the witch. It's incredible. Luckily, Thunder predicted the language problem before we set off and invited Camilla Derry from the sleeping spell to join this travel. She can enable people to communicate with their hearts. Who is Camilla Derry? Oops, I forget all my thoughts can be heard by her now, Margaret thought and quickly concentrated again. She explained in her heart. Camilla Derry is the lady who is helping us to communicate with our hearts. She's a witch just like you. The sailors don't catch witches? Of course, the church has been completely destroyed. Now witches have settled down on the fjords and the sleeping island is a town built by witches. If you want to go there, I'll show you the way. Oh? Joan sounded excited and asked further, what has happened recently? Someone intended to spear me with a harpoon. I thought they must come here for the church's reward. Nothing like that will happen again. Lord Thunder has solved the problem. Thunder? You mean the most distinguished explorer? Yes, he's right behind me. You don't know, but I joined his exploration platoon shortly after I left the fishing village. Really? Tell me more about it. After a long time, Joan said, yeah, and she dove back into the sea, leaving only ripples on the water surface. How's it going? Thunder asked. Margaret turned around and smiled, saying, she's accepted our request. Chapter 564, The Ambassador of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Noise suddenly filled the coach, as it had arrived in the city of Glow. Yorko could not help but open the curtain to have a look. There were all kinds of shop fronts along both sides of the road. Some of the shop owners had erected tents in the front and offered some tables and chairs for the people to have a rest there. Some had their goods laid out on the ground, stood beside them and cried out to attract business. The long street looked just like a market. For a moment, he felt as if he had come to the Eagle City which developed from a market. But he soon thought of the fact that Queen of Clearwater had already burned the Eagle City to the ground. And the shape of the lofty buildings in a distant place also suggested that this city was large and different. What do you think of the king's city of the Kingdom of Dawn? A woman behind him asked drowsily. It's indeed the city of merchants. Even peddler is allowed on the main street. If it's in the Kingdom of Grey Castle, the patrol team will milk them dry. I'm afraid only the fjords can compete with your city. Yorko exclaimed in admiration. The fjords? The women snorted. They're just porters who transport goods to remote places and sell them, taking advantage of price variations in different markets. The islands have nothing to sell except for cheap salted fish. Of course, you're the most brilliant merchant, Yorko said and turned around, smiling. You're not bad yourself, my ambassador, the woman smiled and said, putting her hands on his shoulders. This woman was a noble merchant Yorko met in a border city of the Kingdom of Dawn. Different from the Kingdom of Grey Castle, most nobles in this kingdom had their own business and a rich merchant had a status like a noble since the wealth was comparable to noble titles here. The Kingdom of Dawn was also the main producer of agricultural products and the biggest exporter of textiles among the four kingdoms. Yorko had crammed for his job as an ambassador, studying the history and customs of this neighboring country for a long time before he set out. He knew that playing dumb now and then could please women, but being an idiot who knew nothing would not. The female merchant's name was Denise Peyton. She was about 35 or 36, but still had beautiful skin that was smooth and full of elasticity. She did her light brown hair up, and a wisp of her hair was dyed purple. Yorko found it quite weird when he first saw her, but now he thought it quite nice when he got used to it. As an unattended noblewoman who went on a long journey, Denise was naturally open to all kinds of fun. Yorko spent only 2 days to become a good friend with her and then won her affection with a bottle of perfume. They became attached to each other after a one-night stand and traveled together after that. Denise even pulled him into her own luxury coach. Oh, yeah, what's the best business in the city of Glow now? Why? You want to do business here? Because of my old friend, no, the respected King Wimbledon, I'd probably stay here for a long time, 10 years or even 20 years. As it's the city of merchants, I'd better be one of them, just like what you've told me. Good nobles are good merchants, Dennis added. Yes, good nobles are good merchants. In the Kingdom of Grey Castle, an ambassador was equivalent to an earl in status. Having such a title, how can I not do business? Yorko said while clapping his hands and smiling. That's right. The most popular goods on the market of the king's city can be divided into 2 types. One type is the utensils that you used every day but not the ordinary things, such as crystal glasses, spectacles, perfumes, and fine fabrics. The second type is the novelties. There are no standard prices for these kinds of things. How much you can earn depends on how much your customers like them. Trade exhibitions will be held every weekend in the city. Exhibitions of different classes have different entrance requirements. Denise whispered in Yorko's ear. It sounds interesting. Yorko said and his eyes brightened. It's indeed interesting. You never know what you'll see at the exhibitions. If you're interested, I'll take you to the top one, but there's another business that has overtaken those 2 types recently. Denise paused momentarily to arouse his interest and then continued, the slave trade. Slaves? Aren't they very common for cargo? He was dazed for a moment and asked. I said recently. A business that requires no capital is always the best. You've heard that the church had almost conquered the Kingdom of Wolfheart? Thousands of refugees flock into the Kingdom of Dawn. You can take them to the market and sell them out to make a lot of money. As long as you offer them food. Now, many merchants have gone to the border to make money in the refugee tide, since when the war is over, there'll be no more chances. The female merchant explained. But why did you go the border of the Kingdom of Grey Castle? Yorko asked. I don't like trading people, especially women. Denise shrugged. So, leave it alone. No capital doesn't mean no risk. When the refugees become mobs, it'll be a real headache for the slave traders. Yorko said, holding her in his arms. You seem to really know something about business, she said while covering her mouth. Just at that moment, the coachman in front of their carriage said, "My lady, we've arrived at the palace district. Let's call it a day." Yorko kissed her hard and continued, "Our time on the road was so sweet though it was very short. I'll bear it in my heart. Won't you come to my place and have a rest?" Denise said while ogling him. "No, I have to go. I'm here on official business." Yorko had to refuse her. Knowing that she was a married woman, he did not want to get beat up if her husband found out something when he visited Denise at their place. Yorko hurriedly hopped off the coach and waved to her, saying, "I feel we're going to meet again." "I also think so, and maybe we're going to meet sooner than you expect," she said while raising her eyebrow. "Huh?" Denise drew the curtain and left with a smile. Seeing Yorko got off the coach, the emissary delegation that had followed behind the caravan now walked slowly towards him. "You really deserve the name of Magic Hand. What did you talk about for all these days?" Hill Fox came up and exclaimed. Hill was assigned by His Majesty Roland to work as Yorko's guard. He did not look like a military man at all, but even Yorko had heard that Hill had outstanding meritorious achievements before. "Business, of course. What else could I talk about with a merchant?" Yorko replied. In fact, business was just a subject to start a conversation with the woman. Knowing what made a woman light up was the quickest way to get closer to her, and Yorko could always sell what a woman bought, no matter it was language or a gift. "What are you going to do now?" "Hoist the flag of Hightower and hand in the document. Tell them the ambassador of the Kingdom of Grey Castle has come," Yorko said with an air of contentment. Chapter 565, A Delay. The welcome reception did not start until dusk. The guests were warmly received at the palace hall by Deegan Moya, the first son of King of Dawn. It was Yorko's first time to attend such an exquisite banquet. The entire hall, bright as day, was lit by numerous candles and oil lamps that dazzled like stars. There was a wide-open skylight window next to each of the chandeliers hanging down from the ceiling, which drove away the sultriness from the room. Tables covered with white draperies were arranged in the shape of staircases that were littered with all sorts of glassware. There were red wines which glistened in the candlelight and glowed like rubies. The hall was so extravagantly lavished with silver mirrors and goldware that it looked as magnificent as the palace of the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Nevertheless, what drew Yorko's attention most was those noble ladies wandering among gentlemen. Some of them were young and innocent, while some corpulent and mature. Each of the ladies, whether they put their hair up or not, had a strand of highlight hidden underneath the accessories. Yorko thought of Denise and realized it was a style currently in fashion among nobles of the Kingdom of Dawn. In addition to their hair, most of the ladies were wearing tight silk dresses that perfectly showcased their graceful bodies. Glints of fleeting light twinkled when they strolled across the room. Unlike the gowns girls normally wore in the Kingdom of Grey Castle, these dresses were off-shoulder and cut above knees, beguiling and seductive. Yorko was overjoyed. It was indeed the right choice to come here. Compared with reserved noble ladies in the Kingdom of Grey Castle, the ones in the Kingdom of Dawn were exceptionally cordial. Nonetheless, they showed affections only to good-looking young men and knights rather than plain nobles like him. Yet this was never a problem for Yorko, for he never relied on his appearance to attract women. "Welcome to the Kingdom of Dawn." A slightly pale young man escorted by a large crowd came up to him. "I've read the introduction letter from Roland Wimbledon and the document issued by him. So, he has now unified the whole Kingdom of Grey Castle?" Needless to say, this man was the host of the banquet, Prince Appen Moya. Yorko placed his hand on the chest. Since he represented the royal family of the Kingdom of Grey Castle, he was not required to kneel. Yorko was a little surprised as he bowed. It was understandable that the king asked his eldest son to host the event since he might be caught up in some political affairs. However, it was kind of uncivil to let his son directly read the letter from His Majesty Roland. On a more serious note, it could be even considered as a diplomatic mischief. Yorko answered Prince Appen's question and then asked pretty reluctantly, "Well, how is your father?" "He's ill, very ill." Appen sighed. "That's why he couldn't receive you in person." I'm very sorry to hear that." No worries. Everybody in the city of Glow knows the king's been ill. He collapsed during a banquet 1.5 months ago and has been sick ever since. He's only conscious for 2 or 3 hours per day and insensible for the rest of the time. 1.5 months ago. That was around the same time he set out from the king's city. I'm sure His Majesty will be better. Please don't worry about it too much. Yorko comforted. Thank you. The prince managed to summon up a smile. Enjoy yourself. I'll ask the ceremonial officer to arrange accommodation for you later. Thank you. While Appin was about to leave, Yorko suddenly thought of the real purpose of his trip. He ventured hastily. Your Highness, what about the alliance between the Kingdom of Dawn and the Kingdom of Grey Castle? I've heard about this matter too. But my father is currently too frail to deal with political affairs. Let's hold off on that until he's better. Yorko was slightly relieved after the prince and his fellows walked off. It appeared that he was quite a competent ambassador by nature. He did not make noticeable mistakes during his first meeting with a royal family member of high rank, although things did not go as well as he had expected. However, it did not really bother him, because he would live in the city for a pretty long time regardless, and Moya 4 could not remain sick for the next few years. He should, instead, take this opportunity to pay more attention to the beauties in the hall. We've met again, Mr. Ambassador. While Yorko was pondering, he heard a familiar voice coming from behind. Startled, he turned around abruptly and found Denise Peyton, the businesswoman with whom he had spent a great deal of time with on the way here. How come? I told you that we'd meet again. She smiled while raising a glass of red wine. Cheers, to our reunion. Yorko hurriedly glanced about to make sure no noble was staring in this direction. Are you looking for my husband? Denise raised her brows. Relax. He's not entitled to attend this reception. Are you saying? I'm the one who manages the Peyton family, not him, Denise said bluntly, and there are more than enough housemaids for him to indulge in. He's not allowed to seek pleasure outside without my permission. That's the reason, Yorko's heart lightened. It seemed that Denise was the real heir of the Peyton family. In order to inherit the family, the daughter would normally seek a partner, often a diminished noble, to live with her. Due to the huge difference in their status, it was usually the male partner that changed his name. You should have told me earlier. Yorko put on a relieved look. I don't want to split up such an affectionate couple and interfere with your special relationship. Really? Denise smiled. It wasn't special when you held out your hand to me. She paused for a moment and then asked, do you have any plans after the banquet? Well, I guess no, Yorko answered while winding an arm around her dainty waist, if you invite me. Then I know a good place. All up to you, darling. After the banquet, Otto pulled Prince Appin aside, looking quite confused. I don't understand, Your Highness. Even if His Majesty is ill, you can still enter into an alliance with the Kingdom of Grey Castle, as this is also what your father intends to do. Why do you want to set the matter aside? With the church putting pressure on us, it isn't a good idea to fight alone. I've heard that father asked you to meet with Timothy Wimbledon rather than Roland Wimbledon? We're allying with the King of Grey Castle. The ambassador has also confirmed that Roland is the new king of our neighbor. Appin Moya nodded. You did a great job on the confidential trip to the Kingdom of Grey Castle. But I have my own thoughts on the alliance. Leave it to me. Your Highness. You don't understand. Appin interrupted. For the sake of the Kingdom of Dawn. It's for the safety of the kingdom that we need someone to help us stop the attacks from the church. I said leave it to me. Appin could not help raising his voice. I'm sorry. I lost my composure. As the prince insisted, he had no choice but acquiesce. Just as he turned around, Appin suddenly questioned him. We're friends, aren't we? Otto was silent for a moment and then answered, yes. Andrea, Belinda, Aro, and me, all of us are your friends. If father can't make it, Appin spoke slowly, you'll help me to the throne, right? Chapter 566, A Promise and a Mission. Otto Luashi locked himself in the study after he returned home. He did not understand why things had turned out this way. Ever since the king had been ill, Appin appeared to have been in a great shock until recently, when he was finally able to recollect himself. But the way he spoke and the manner in which he conducted himself were somewhat different than before. To put it more accurately, he had become rather unfamiliar to Otto. As Appin's playmate, Otto believed that he knew the prince very well. Appin was not that type of power-hungry person who would attain his ends regardless of the means. Sometimes he even felt the prince was too juvenile to be a competent king. Because of this, he planned to, in collaboration with Belinda and Oro, fully support Appin and help him with governmental duties after the prince ascended the throne. After all, the three families had been assisting the king since the foundation of the Kingdom of Dawn. That was the reason he had replied yes without hesitation. However, Otto found that Appin did not care about his answer. He asked him that question simply out of a sense of insecurity. Although the three families were very willing to support the royal family, he had never thought about whether His Highness really needed their assistance. At this thought, Otto felt Appin more distant. He breathed a long sigh. Perhaps he should take the initiative to do something about it. But what should he do? Neither pharmacists nor alchemists could do anything about the king's illness. He had no knowledge of medical treatment and certainly could not completely ease Appin's mind. Or cheer the prince up? Otto pondered. He had vainly tried numerous times to do so. Perhaps it was impossible to raise the prince's spirits by himself. The three families must cooperate and work together. Only in this way were they possibly able to find the reason behind Appin's behavior. With this thought, Otto got to his feet abruptly and walked out. "Master, it's late now. Where are you going?" The steward trotted to him as he passed through the hall. "To Tokat's place. I'm staying over." Otto knew every turn of the road leading to the territory of the Tokats. As Otto knew Tokat well, nobody in the mansion stopped him. Otto went straight to the martial arts room. As he expected, Oro Tokat was practicing with his guards. "Hey, what brought you here?" Oro took off the sweaty headband and tossed the guard his wooden sword. "You need a wingman? I have something to tell you." He pulled Oro to the resting room next door where he spilled out his thoughts and plan. At length, he asked, "What do you think?" "To find out why Appin has become so weird?" Oro twitched his mouth. "Sorry, I'm not interested." "Hey, you. He's a prince, the successor of the King of Dawn. He'll not be our buddy forever, don't you understand?" Oro shook his head. "Plus, Appin is 20 years old. He isn't a 7 or 8-year-old any longer. We don't have the obligation to cheer him up every time he's ill-tempered. If he doesn't want to spill his guts, and then fine, I don't want to be nosy." "Aren't you planning to assist Appin Moya?" "It'll be called assistance only if His Highness needs it. Otherwise, you're just being annoying." Did he also notice the change in the prince? Otto thought with a quiver. "But we three families always support Moya." "Three families?" Oro smiled carelessly. "After Andrea died, there are only you and me." He turned around and walked out while waving his hand. "Since you're here, let me take you to Crimson Dream. Get yourself laid and forget about these trifles. You look so stressed." "Andrea is alive." Oro stopped abruptly. "Sorry." Otto apologized in silence. He had failed to keep Andrea's secret. "Andrea Quinn is still alive." He repeated. "I saw her in Border Town when I went to the Kingdom of Grey Castle." Oro instantly turned around and dashed to him, almost pushing him to the wall. What did you say?" Is it true?" "I saw her with my own eyes. She's with Prince Roland Wimbledon." "With Prince Roland Wimbledon?" Oro's eyes were wide open. "Like they're in a relationship?" "I don't know." Oro bit his lip. "But she's become a witch. Only Prince Roland is willing to accept witches out of the entire Kingdom of Grey Castle." "Hang on. You said witch?" Oro was stunned. What actually happened at that time? Luashi related all the details of what Andrea had experienced back then. He felt the sweetness of revenge as he watched Oro torn by his emotions. It was too late for Oro to do anything about it now because he firmly believed that the Quinns had fallen off the cliff at that time. Now, Andrea would fall in love with neither of them. That was the reason her father made it look like an unfortunate accident and had people believe that Andrea fell off the cliff. Greatly depressed, Oro threw himself on the floor after hearing the story. Damn. Why have I never thought of opening up her grave and looking into the matter? Such a cunning guy. Oro snapped in silence. Ahem. Therefore, we can see an urgent need to cheer Prince Appin up. Otto reminded him. Oro gave his friend a side look. Huh? What's the connection between these two incidents? Of course there's a connection. Think about it. Appin's hesitating about forming an alliance between the two nations, and he didn't even give an explicit reason. If the plan of joint defense fails, we'll have to fight against the church alone in the event of an attack. If the church invades the kingdom of Dawn first, you'll take the knights to defend the country, won't you? Otto asked. Absolutely. It's my duty. If you're killed in action, you won't see Andrea again, correct? It sounds kind of rational. No, how can you be so sure that I'll be killed? Oro challenged indignantly. Even the kingdom of Wolfheart, whose people are famous for their strength and power, has been defeated by the church. What are your odds of winning? Otto ignored his friend's protest and continued, if the church, contrarily, attacks the kingdom of Grey Castle first, Roland has to fight back, right? If he's dead, Andrea will very likely die with him. Even if she's caught alive by the church, she'll suffer tortures more miserable than a clean death. If the two nations, however, enter into an alliance and agree to offer mutual assistance, the church won't boldly launch an attack. Both you and Andrea will be alive and will probably see each other in the future. In this light, do you still think the alliance is significant? Yes. We need the prince to help with that. Now, do you still think the two matters are relevant? Yes. Are you in? Oro answered resolutely, yes. With these words, Otto and Oro clasped each other's hands tightly. Yorko returned to his lodge, exhausted but pleased. As he pushed the bedroom door open, he heard a voice from inside. You're finally back. Yorko was shocked. Who would sneak in his room and wait for him right after his arrival at the Kingdom of Dawn? Could it be Denise's husband who married into the family? He was still debating whether he should run away or plead for mercy when the man lit the candle and walked to him. It was Hill Fox in the candlelight. You scared the hell out of me. Do you know? Yorko heaved a long sigh. Whatever you've got to say, can't you wait till tomorrow? We can only talk unnoticed at nighttime. Hill threw up his hands. Please understand that I have a habit of being cautious. All right then. Although Hill was his guard, he was appointed to him by Roland and could not be treated as any other guards. Well, say what you want to say since you're already here. It's now a good opportunity to recruit talents among the refugees from the Kingdom of Wolfheart. You can view it as a business and hire masons, literates, and anyone who has an expertise. His Majesty will disburse you all the necessary expenses. You'll get 5 silver royals for each person you hire. For God's sake, I know nothing about business. I talked to Denise just for a casual chat. You don't think I'll be really trafficking refugees, do you? Yorko put his hand on the forehead. Plus, slaves are usually traded on the border of the two nations. It doesn't look nice for me to go there as an ambassador. This is His Majesty's order, Hill said in a steady tone. You don't need to leave City of Glow. Tradesmen will sooner or later transfer slaves here, although at a higher price. It saves you trouble to screen them. As to the business side of the matter, you can discuss with Denise Payton. She's quite a well-known businesswoman around this area. It's a piece of cake for her to send refugees to the Kingdom of Grey Castle. We'll benefit a lot once the transportation route is determined. For example, we can disguise ourselves as tradesmen and retreat unnoticed when facing unexpected danger. Yorko's jaw dropped. Have you been to the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn? Hill shook his head. Then how do you know such details? I was collecting information from people on the street while you were busy socializing. I thought you were just a great knight. I didn't know you're also a good tradesman. Yorko smacked his lips. I'm neither a warrior nor a tradesman, but I can protect you when there's a crisis. This is also what His Majesty entrusted me to do. So you are? Just an ordinary acrobat, Hill answered while smiling. Chapter 567, Explosive Shells. A suburb beyond the West City Wall, Neverwinter. A great roar attracted the civilians to ascend the city wall to watch from up high. The First Army had sealed the entrances to the misty forest in case anyone broke into the experiment ground. Although the location was not close to the city wall, one could clearly see what was happening with a telescope from there. It seems we have to look for a remote place as a special base for testing firearms. Roland thought to himself. Your Majesty, the second volley is ready. An artillery soldier reported. Everybody goes into the bunker. Roland waved his hand. Start the countdown after confirming no one is on the ground. It was the test fire of the 152mm howitzer. While researching on the sigil of magic stones, Roland included the advancement of firearms. Now with Timothy being killed and the northern region having announced submission, the situation in the Kingdom of Grey Castle was fairly good. Now Roland had time to put his mind on further promoting the shells. But he had to admit that the technical difficulties of developing a howitzer with an impact detonator were much greater than those of developing solid shells. Anna would make 4 howitzer shells for test fire every day. Yet 3 consecutive days later, none had successfully exploded. What's worse, on the second day, one shell exploded right after it got out of the chamber, which damaged the new artillery barrel too much for test firing. Fortunately, Roland took precautions by digging several trenches around the experiment ground, which successfully prevented casualties. The eardrums of a few soldiers who stayed close to the artillery were damaged by the roar, but Nana healed them in time. Is this thing really like what you said, exploding the moment it touches the enemy? Agatha could not help but stick her head out to watch. I've asked Anna. It's nothing but a few pieces of sheet metal put together. It's not alive, so how can it know whether it touches as an enemy? Agatha must be the most enthusiastic witch toward weapon test in the Union. Upon hearing the test, she put aside her production work in the chemical plant and personally came to observe the research development of the new shell. It doesn't explode when it touches the enemy, but when it falls into the enemy's position. Roland corrected her. It's a basic requirement the howitzer has to meet. If there isn't a safety to make sure of it, the shell could fire accidentally at any time. That would be too dangerous. The trigger safety was the most basic technology for the new shell, at the same time the focal point of the test. To prevent explosions triggered by collision or accidental drop, Roland made great efforts to set 3 safety systems. The first one was to separate, store, and transport the fuses and shells, and install them when needed. The fuse looked like a cone with a handle and was the size of a fist. With the threads on its bottom, it could be conveniently and easily screwed into the notch on top of the shell. The shell was filled with double-base chemical gunpowder, a kind of material that was hard to ignite without a detonator, which essentially ensured the logistics work. The second one was the inertia safety in the fuse. The safety device resembled a gate lock. Unarmed, it could not move due to being held in place by a stiff spring. When the shell was fired, the tremendous inertia kicked back the lock cylinder, overcoming the resistance of the spring, pulling open the latch, and removing the safety. The theory was easy, yet hard to put into practice. Roland and the witches spent most of the first 2 days on it. If the spring was too hard, the lock cylinder could not get enough recoil distance. If it was too soft, it could not guarantee safety. Anna had to gradually adjust it based on the test results. After 8 rounds of test firing, they finally attained the relatively reliable statistics on the compressibility of the spring. The last one was the centrifugal primer detonator. It was also the device with the most technology in the fuse. Simply put, it embedded the detonator in a coin-sized half-circle iron plate. Normally, while being fixed by a spring, the detonator would stand in the middle of the fuse at an angle. With such a setup as this, the firing pin, detonator, and explosive powder were not aligned. This way, even if the shell fell off from high above, the firing pin would not touch the detonator, so as to prevent accidental explosions. Only when the latch was separated from the lock in the second safety, could the iron plate be mobilized. After being shot, the grenade spun at a drastically high speed because of the rifling in the barrel. Under the centrifugal force, the tilting detonator gradually stood upright, just like a spinning top whose center of gravity gradually closed on its axis line. This process completed after the bullet had left the muzzle for 200 or 300 meters, so even if the muzzle was stuck or the bullet ran into tree branches, it would not detonate prematurely. When the detonator returned to the upright position, it aligned with the firing pin and explosive powder. Under this circumstance, once the fuse touched the ground, the firing pin instantly inserted into the detonator, and then the explosive powder pushed the superhot gunpowder into the warhead, which in turn exploded the surrounding enemies into pieces. The advantage of the centrifugal safety lay in the fact that if the shell failed to explode, without the centrifugal force the detonator would be popped back to its original tilting position by the spring, which made the retrieving work much safer. Besides, if the entire grenade was grasped or accidentally found by the enemy, it could only be used as a normal solid shell when it could not get enough centrifugal force from not being fired in a conventional manner. As for tearing it apart and replicating it, that would be merely impossible. Prepare to fire. Start countdown at 5. An observer gave the order. The repeatedly lengthened lanyard was gradually tightened while the gunner in the trench retrieved the rope bit by bit. Fire. As the gunner yanked on the rope, the ground instantly trembled. A roar and fierce wind from the muzzle passed across the spectators' heads. Roland felt numerous soil particles rushed at his collar. Even if he had his ears solidly covered, he could feel tremors coming through his feet. Found the falling point. Explosion failed. Repeat. Explosion failed. Lightning's voice came from the sigil of listening in Nightingale's hand. I see. We'll be right there, she replied and took out a magic stone. We failed again? Agatha said with disappointment. Failure is too common while experimenting. Anna consoled her. As soon as we find the correct direction, we can guarantee success in mass production. Nicely put. Roland praised her while patting her head. Besides, now with the help of Summer and Sylvie, the research and development speed is astonishing. Even in modern times, it was common if thousands of shells were fired during the grenade testing, so to find any problems with 2 to 3 shots was like mission impossible. Reaching the falling point of the bullet, Anna cut the fuse with black fire to ensure the safety of the payload. The soldiers then collected the failed shell. Either the gunpowder or the metal shell could be recycled, so it would be a waste to throw them away. Summer, it's your turn, Roland said with a gesture. Yes, Your Majesty. Summer nodded. Exhibiting her playback ability, the phantom of a shell that was about to fall to the ground instantly appeared in front of everybody. Although Summer's magic power was still at a low level, after 4 months of practicing, she could only use it 4 times per day. With precise control on the magic power, she could fix the playback image at an exact moment. Such an ability was to perfectly replay the scene. In other words, Sylvie could see the inside of the phantom, except being intangible, it had no difference from the real scene. With the help of Summer and Sylvie, Roland was able to determine the spring tension after only 8 rounds of test firing. Chapter 568, The Dry Distillation Tower. Sylvie carefully examined the shell and checked it against Roland's design for a long time. She pointed at the detonator and said, "It seems this bronze tube is not aligned with the nail on the top." "How about the spring?" asked Anna. "Is it still stuck at both sides of the iron pan? One has gone bad. To the left or the right?" Anna asked about every detail, and then wrote all the problems down in a notebook. After collecting the reasons leading to the failure, they began the next round of test firing, where Summer's playback ability could be used 4 times. Thus the efficiency of the improvement had become unprecedentedly high. Unfortunately, the next 2 rounds of test shooting failed again. Roland had to declare that the testing would continue the next day. To Summer and Sylvie, their work for the day was finished. Afterwards, they could either go back to the castle to enjoy a delicious afternoon tea or go to the convenience market to check for novel goods. But to Anna and Agatha, the test firing of the grenade was merely a small part of their tight schedule, especially to Anna. She not only had to improve the fuse based on the reasons that were found to have led to failure, but she also needed to finish the research and assembly of the steam turbine. Roland had planned to follow her to the North Slope backyard to check the turbine model, yet his guard Sean brought a piece of news from the city hall. Your Majesty, Lysia, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Construction, wished for you to visit the furnace area. He said he had completed the construction of the first oven for dry distillation. As the necessary equipment of the coking plant, 10 towers for dry distillation were planned, and they were to be located around the furnace cluster at the foot of the North Slope mine area. Due to the overcutting of trees for the burning of bricks and iron making, the area that the furnace cluster took up enlarged from the original open space of less than 1,000 square meters to a wide open area stretching along the mountain. If Roland had not strictly prohibited the cutting of trees near the town, none of the trees at the northern part of the border area would have survived. Although coal had been found, charcoal that was easy to get was still the major fuel for iron making. With trees available getting further and further from the furnace cluster, the workers targeted the top of North Slope Mountain. Every day there were hundreds of logs cut off and rolled down from the mountaintop. Watching from a distance, it looked like the green peak had a small bald spot. Normally, Roland would not ask the workers to protect the environment in this matter. As long as the dust that would have risen did not affect the town, he would not care even if all the trees on North Slope Mountain were cut down. After all, to the impassable mountain range, this protruding mountain range was nothing but an insignificant corner. With Leaf maintaining the basic vegetation, there was no need to worry about soil erosion. As to the ground reclaimed at the foot of the mountain, it naturally became the most suitable building sites for coking plants. Followed by Nightingale and his guards, Roland walked through the noisy furnace area and reached the first tower for dry distillation. Lysia walked up to welcome Roland instantly, bowed and said, Your Majesty, as you demanded, I've constructed this double-layer furnace with refractory bricks. According to the drawing, the upper layer should be sealed with an iron gate while the interlayer should be equipped with a mobile iron plate. But I don't know who can make them. The same is true of the copper pipe and chimney on the small side furnace. Apart from these metal components, the rest has been completed. Roland lowered his head and went to the interior of the furnace to have a thorough examination. He was totally impressed by what he saw. He had to admit that Lysia, the former member of the Mason Guild, the old friend of Carl van Bate, was indeed excellent at masonry. The inner walls of this nearly 6-meter-high tower for dry distillation was evenly constructed, the spaces between bricks were all of similar thickness, the bricks were all interlaced, without 2 layers of vertical seams aligned. One could see that Lysia's laying skill was extraordinary and his working attitude was very serious. After all, the products different people made could be drastically different, even if they referred to the same drawing. Well done. After the examination, Roland praised him saying, I'll arrange the cast of the iron gate and iron plate. You'll only need to cover with refractory bricks on the side exposed to fire. Your Majesty, hesitating for a while, Lysia asked, Could you please tell me how the furnace operates? Why? Do you wish to become a coking worker? Roland said jokingly. Of course not. Lysia hurriedly shook his head. Since I've never built such a strange furnace, I had to build according to my speculation for the places that I wasn't sure of on the drawing. So if I can understand its function and working mechanism, not only can I finish the second furnace faster, but also I can improve the places that I wasn't sure about before. Ah, that's his reasons. Roland thought and said smilingly, This kind of furnace is mainly used for the dry distillation of coal. You must have seen how the charcoal is burned. The burning of coal is similar but on a bigger scale. The lower layer is for burning, the upper layer is for baking, and both layers use coal as filling. Baking coal with coal? Lysia surprisedly asked. That's right. After the dry distillation, coal can be transformed into coke. Coke can reach a higher temperature while burning, which makes it a better fuel for smelting steel. In addition, the process of dry distillation will create several byproducts. The pipes on the tower wall are used to collect them, rather than to exhaust gases as a chimney does. Then, why do you build a small furnace at the side of the main furnace? No air is allowed on the upper layer during the dry distillation, otherwise the coal will directly burst into flames. Roland pointed at the reserved holes between the two furnaces and said, while burning, the limestone in the small furnace will produce a large amount of carbon dioxide. You can consider it as a sort of non-flammable gas. Your Majesty, I know that, Lysias said, I learned it from the night classes. That'll be easy then. Roland felt gratified. It seems that the universal education has broadened its content under the effort of scroll. He continued, through the pipes, the carbon dioxide will reach the upper layer of the furnace and push away the air, and then the coal can be dry distilled. As for the limestone, the off-white stones burned to make cement, are all over the North Slope mountain. After examining the dry distillation tower number 1, Roland retraced his steps. On the way back, he took a short break at the furnace area. Seeing this busy scene, Roland could not help but feel thrilled. Standing side by side, the various brick furnaces looked like an orderly red forest. Rising from the forest were tens of entangled gray, white, and black smoke columns, which constituted a rather modern picture when seen together with the plainly dressed workers and outdated equipment. Over 10 steam engines were roaring, dragging the conveyor belt to carry chunks of materials and charcoals into the blast furnace. A track system was paved from the mine to the furnace, and many mine wagons traveled between the two stops. The speed of transportation had greatly improved. After finishing the construction of the steel plant and forge plant, this place would be another core location of City of Neverwinter. Ore exploitation and steel smelting preceded the transformation of the steel into various raw materials which were then transported to processing plants. These processes symbolized an industrial flower arising from here. The human beings were bestowed with extraordinarily refining powers, which consequently gave them the courage to conquer everything. Chapter 569, Power Threatened. As the desolate spring came to an end, summer was drawing near. The population growth rate of City of Neverwinter enjoyed its first explosive peak. The mission of attracting refugees in the southern and eastern areas began to take effect. With the experience from the previous year, the working efficiency of the envoy teams greatly increased. Every day, hundreds of refugees gathered in Redwater City and Willow Town, waiting for the boats from the western region to transfer them to City of Neverwinter, which was said to be rich and stable. In order to appropriately accommodate these people, the City Hall also commissioned businessmen to rent temporary barracks at the gathering place, and offered porridge and water, to prevent any accidents before the refugees arrived at the western region. The pier of the border area had become the busiest location of the city. 90% of the police were dispatched to maintain order and register the population. There was always a long line of people in front of the barrier for medical inspections. The officers who were responsible for residential control divided the swarmed-in refugees into several categories and moved them into riverbank boardrooms, West City cave dwellings, and formal residences accordingly. For this reason, City Hall turned into a bustling place every day. 3 sailing ships from Redwater City just arrived at the pier, 126 people are on board, a blue flag is hanging on the mast, and Bob is in charge. Again? How many batches have arrived today? 4 or 5 batches? Stop nagging. Go and receive them. Well, who'll take over Bob's job and go to Redwater City? I will. Hang on, I'll be ready right away. Take some soap with you. You can't buy any there. Listening to the noisy chatters outside of his office, Barra felt distressed, not because he was too busy though. Usually, when he worked in the City Hall, more work brought him more pleasure. But recently, the situation had become complicated. The reason lay in Edith Kant. Director, the Ministry of Justice is urging us for more personnel again. An assistant walked into his office and said. His Excellency Carter asked us to recruit another 100 people as backup policemen. He said if he doesn't get more hands, the city's order will be out of control. If anything happens and His Majesty asks, we should take the blame as well. Now that he's the chief knight, he could put more words in front of His Majesty. Bhairav thought to himself. But for minor stuff like this, he did not have time to attend. While drafting a document, Bhairav said without raising his head, "Put it on the desk. I'll handle it later." "Yes, sir." As the assistant left the room, Edith's voice sounded in his ears. "Is this the recruitment order? Since you're too busy, let me help you with it." "Here she is." Bhairav moaned in his heart. Not even using honorifics. Of course, Edith is the daughter of Duke of the Northern Region, a status much higher than mine. Before I became the real hand of the king, she could address me by name without using any respectful form. But no matter what, I'm about half a mentor to her, because His Majesty arranged for her to be an assistant to learn the departmental framework and government process of the City Hall in my office. Yet it seems she doesn't think so. Okay, that's fine," he said involuntarily. No matter how reluctant he felt, he could not find any mistake in Miss Const's behavior. If he repeatedly rejected her, he would appear in the wrong. Especially at this crucial moment, he could not risk leaving any bad impression on His Majesty. He should never forget that Roland Wimbledon was a man with great insight. "Thanks." Soon, rustling sounds of writing came from the opposite desk. Several minutes later, Edith put the recruitment order back onto Bhairav's desk. "Judging from the drafts I went through recently, such recruitment orders usually require the personnel to be reliable and have a clean slate, but there aren't many such candidates left in the border area. Compared with posting recruitment bulletins on the square and asking for the candidates to apply for work at the City Hall, it'd be better if we extract the files of registered residents in the archives and select 100 unemployed locals. The Ministry of Justice is a large department in the City Hall. It provides relatively good salary and welfare. I think no one would turn down such a job offer. In this way, we'll save about a week over recruiting through normal procedures, and will, in turn, decrease the complaints from Chief Knight. If you approve it, I'll reply it on this recruitment order and give it to the archives." Her voice was clear and sensible. It was hard to imagine that she joined City Hall only 2 weeks ago. In the beginning, she was just quietly sitting aside and watching Bhairav review documents, seldom saying anything. But now, she could handle all sorts of affairs in the City Hall with high proficiency. Do it your way then." For the moment, Bhairav could not find a better solution than Edith's suggestion. With his tight schedule, it would be possible that he ignored such petty things and just handled it in the usual way. Is this how a successor turned out to be after growing up in a duke's mansion and educated by the upper-level noble? Bhairav felt greatly threatened. Yes, honorifics and respect were just minor details. What he really cared about was the power in his hands. Now the propaganda that calls for submission is all over the northern region. If Edith is sent by His Majesty as an assistant to help set up a secondary city hall in the northern region in the future, it would be no big deal. But what if she stays? His Majesty is not yet married, and Edith is the daughter of a duke. At this thought, Bhairav could not help but feel distressed. This won't work. I must make her know that the management work in the city hall can't be mastered that easily. His Majesty needs a minister who's able to take the whole situation into account. When Edith returned to the office, Bhairav cleared his throat and handed her a statistics form. "We're in trouble," Bhairav said with a low voice. "The grain stock in city of Neverwinter might not last until the wheat bumper harvest day." Is it caused by an overflow of population?" Edith glanced at the form and said, "According to the consumption rate, the remaining grain should be able to last until the end of the summer. We can harvest the spring wheat in the middle of July. It should be enough if we stop accepting new refugees." But the city hall can't stop accepting new refugees. Because of the population target of 100,000 set by His Majesty? "No, that's not the point," Bhairav said while shaking his head. There's still a constant flow of refugees from both the east and south sides of the country to the gathering place. If we abandon them, not only will Redwater City and Willow Town face the risk of a riot, but also the image we worked hard to build up will be destroyed overnight. If we ever want to recruit refugees again, it'll be very difficult. His Majesty once revealed to me that the realization of his development plan needs a large number of people. 100,000 subjects are just the beginning, so the City Hall won't disrupt His Majesty's plan because of the grain problem. We must tackle this problem, and it's also my responsibility as a minister. He paused, and then looked at Edith Kant. Do you have any good ideas? Chapter 570, Edith's Reasons. In a sense, there was no solution to this problem. The reason lay in the fact that the total amount of grain was limited. After the months of demons, the circulating grain in the kingdom would enter a state of shortage. Grain prices would definitely soar, and there would be none to be found in the market. The grain shortage could not be relieved until the new wheat was harvested. Autumn was the season in which grain was most frequently traded. After that, when the months of demons began, the situation would just worsen again. Of course, the grain transactions were usually among businessmen and nobles. As for those penniless refugees and rats, they would have to get through the winter with an empty stomach regardless the amount of wheat present. According to Barev's year's worth of experience as an assistant minister, businessmen in the major cities were waiting for the ears of wheat to mature. Before that, they were unlikely to sell the grains at hand in large amounts. What remained in their hands might be enough to feed a few thousands of people, but never for 10,000s of people. Since we can't find more resources, we need to tighten the consumption. Cut the city's grain supply and reduce each person's quota for daily purchase. Change the subject's diet from bread to oatmeal, and keep it that way till the day of bumper harvest. Those are the possible suggestions that Edith is going to make. Then I can refute her suggestions for the following reasons. They're against His Majesty's grain promises, they're contrary to the kingdom's intrinsic values, they might cause food panic and so on. Judging by Edith's expression, and reading the list with her eyebrows raised, I know she must feel it troublesome. It won't be long before she asks for my advice. Thinking of this, Barev could not help but touch his beard. The so-called taking the whole situation into account not only meant that the minister needed to be skilled and experienced in governmental affairs, but also needed to clearly know about the characteristics of the city. For example, when he was in King's City, he could recite the prices of the alchemist workshop specialties, and the amount of Silver City's monthly silver or shipment without hesitation. All those numbers could not be remembered in a short time. The characteristic of City of Neverwinter was the witches. Barev knew a green-haired woman called Leaf in the Witch Union who could make the wheat grow at an inconceivable rate. If not caring about the maintenance of the land, she could make the wheat ready for reaping within one day, and the ears they produced were not something that golden ones could compare to. In other words, they only needed to ask her to manage a piece of wheat field for rapid production, and then the grain shortage could be easily solved. Of course, he also knew that His Majesty had asked Leaf to control Misty Forest in the west, so as to build the early warning defensive line against demons. Given the emergence of such enemies, it needed several years, and so it would not matter much if Leaf took 2 to 3 months off. But there was no way that Edith could know that information. Even if she was super talented and took part in managing the northern region affairs since adulthood, there was no way that she could clearly know the city, which was completely strange to her half a month ago, not to mention to know the abilities of each witch. Also, she could not understand why the office of the Ministry of Education was adjacent to the archives, why the Minister of Education often appeared in the archives and had the authority to look at all the documents. After a long while, Edith put down the list and slightly smirked. Actually, it's not a big deal. Barev nodded, then startled. What? Before the development of Deep Valley Town, most of the land in the northern region wasn't fit for wheat plantation. In every spring, grain shortage used to be very severe in this area, so the local lord set eyes on the eastern region and Kingdom of Dawn. You mean, he suddenly realized something. Since they couldn't grow enough nor purchase any, the only choice left for them was to rob, Edith said with an easy tone. Isn't it exactly the situation we're in? His Majesty's army is attacking Fallen Dragon Ridge. I heard Countess Spear's brother won over a lot of the local nobles in order to resist her. Is that right? Now that we have both the reasons and the means, we should directly go there and kill them one by one. Guess how many gold royals and grain is hidden in their basements? There's only a grain shortage because the amount circulating is too few. As a matter of fact, most of the grain output in the kingdom has been divided and taken by the nobles. They use that grain to control the freemen and farmers in their domains, and to earn many gold royals in a lean year. She did not talk fast, but yet her voice gave Berev a chill. If we rake over Fallen Dragon Ridge, I think the problem of 10,000s of people's food will naturally be solved. If not, there are several cities in the southeast region awaiting His Majesty's ransack. But they're all nobles. Berev shut his mouth before finishing talking. That's right. After His Majesty took over the southern territory, they stopped being nobles. As long as we act fast enough, the captured grain will be able to refill the granary of City of Neverwinter. Besides, different from King's City, Fallen Dragon Ridge has completely fallen into His Majesty's control, which is also the crucial pass on the way to the southern territory. By then, not only will the City Hall send people to assist Countess Spear to establish a new government, but the inner city will also adopt the laws, urban planning, and education system of City of Neverwinter. What confused Berev was how Edith could accept His Majesty's will of eliminating the nobles so quickly. Even for himself, it would take a much longer time to get used to wholeheartedly supporting His Majesty's orders, let alone her who was the successor to the Duke of the Northern Region. Edith returned to the Foreign Affairs building. Pushing open the door, she saw Cole crouching on the desk and flipping through a thin book. What's that? I bought it from the convenience market. It looks like a picture book, but it has stories. It's very interesting. The brother looked up. You look happy. Do I? Edith asked. In City of Evernight, you rarely smiled like this, Cole said, smirking. Are we really not going back? Only temporarily. Until Father replies, His Majesty should allow you to return to the northern region. Edith sat down in front of him, closed the book to look at its cover and saw the words printed The Witch Diaries. What about you then? I'm going to stay here. Why? Cole asked in bewilderment. Is the City Hall that interesting? What's interesting isn't the City Hall, but Roland Wimbledon's City Hall. She corrected him, smilingly. Do you know how I got things done in City of Evernight? You only had to tell Father and it was done. More or less. I just gave an order, and then naturally there would be people who did it for me. When I think back to it, they did that not because of me, but because of my identity. They knew Father would follow my suggestions. Of course, this only worked in the Comte family's manner, Edith said with great enthusiasm, but here, my identity not only doesn't help but rather hampers. There is barely any noble in the City Hall, and no one actually cares whether I'm the daughter of the Duke of the Northern Region. Everybody is relying on his or her own capabilities. Do you understand what I mean? Cole shook his head. People are willing to listen to you, not because who you are, but because what you're capable of. This rule applies even out of your manor. His Majesty is right about one thing, feudalism seems to give the nobles great power, but it also set an upper limit for their power. Judging from the current situation, His Majesty is totally capable of enlarging his domain into the entire continent, then the City Hall will turn into a huge institution, and its prefecture will expand into every corner of Grey Castle. As long as you're recognized in this organization, this entire kingdom might just operate based on one word you said. So, why would I settle for that small manor? Chapter 571, The Duke and Father. Edith, you cruel wretch. Calvin, Duke of the Northern Region, grabbed the teacup on the table, wanting to smash it onto the ground but suddenly stopped with his hand in the air. He felt a little reluctant since the cup was made of the best quality crystal glass and worth 2 or 3 gold royals. After a thought, he gradually lowered his hand and put the cup back on the table. Needing to worry about such minor gains and losses made him even more depressed. Edith's letter was also put on the table. He could not believe what was written in it. Out of his expectation, His Majesty wanted to reclaim the power of the noble, and his daughter, who had always brought him profits before, promised the king without hesitation this time. Besides, she even persuaded him to recognize the fact and stop resisting in the letter. He felt that the way she wrote to him as if she was talking to a captive. The Duke thought bitterly that his daughter must be helping the others rather than her own father. The guard outside the door probably heard the noise and looked in, asking, "My lord, what happened?" "Get out, leave me alone." As Calvin was unwilling to vent his anger on the cup, he took out his fury on this guard, who swiftly closed the door. The Duke panted for a long time before he could return his gaze to the letter. As he had eliminated the house family and list of family, he finally was in complete control of the whole northern region now. If he chose to accept His Majesty's requirements, he would no longer be the lord of the northern region, at least, no longer the ruler who dictated in this region. He thought he would return to his original point, or even worse. But if he did not accept his daughter's suggestion, what would happen? Edith also described the result of this choice in the letter. "If you choose to do so, Cole and I will be doomed. He'll be held captive in the prison forever, just like the heir of Duke Ryan. As for me, I'll end up even worse. What do you think Prince Roland will do to a defenseless daughter of a duke? I can list a series of torturing methods that'll excite a man without too many efforts. When he got tired of me, I'd be put into his dungeon or battalion, and your pearl of northern region will be covered with dust forever. However, instead of worrying about me, you'd better worry about yourself first, since his army will besiege your city and your feudatory and knights can hardly resist for half a day. After that, it's impossible for you to be an ordinary person, let alone a duke. How is it? Are you going to make such an unwise choice?" Calvin was familiar with this tone, and he could even picture his daughter writing the letter with a sneer on her face. Whenever it came to failure, she would always describe her fate in an extremely cold tone, as if she was waiting for the moment all the time, and when she talked that way, Calvin was immediately swamped. He knew that she was apparently threatening him, but he could not lift his spirit up to scold her. After all, Edith Conte was his own daughter and the only child he had with his first wife. Despite the fact that Edith exaggerated the matter, he still had to admit the possibility. He himself had also heard lots about that dandy Prince Roland. The Duke gradually calmed down at this thought. But he was still wondering whether the black steel machines were as incredible as she depicted or not. He thought in surprise. Edith used 3 sheets of paper to write the letter, and among them, she used a whole sheet of paper to describe what she had seen in Border Town, oh no, in City of Neverwinter. The description was even twice as much as that of His Majesty Roland. Edith claimed that the super-powerful machines beyond imagination could easily complete tasks that were considered to be impossible by the ordinary people, and that if they surrendered to the new king, the northern region would be able to import those black iron machines, which would bring an earth-shaking change to their domain. Calvin could tell from the description that Edith thought highly of the machines. In the last part of the letter, she suggested that Calvin should send His Majesty a formal document to take an oath of allegiance and to show the submission of the northern region to the new king, and meanwhile, dispatch servants who could read and write to learn the rules and regulations of the city hall, getting the domain prepared for the new system. Besides, I sincerely hope that you can order Cole to stay in City of Neverwinter instead of calling him back to the northern region, which will do him no good at all. If you agree, you can also send Lance here when he reaches an adult age. Given that the noble titles can no longer be inherited, only the men who well adapt to the new system of His Majesty can succeed the Comte family and keep it thriving. Your daughter, Edith. After reading the letter, Calvin heaved a long sigh and put it away. He spread a new sheet of white paper. Thinking that as Edith had already made the decision, he had to believe her and write His Majesty a letter showing his loyalty to the new king's city. However, as a duke, he had to make his last efforts to ensure the family's profits. He believed that he would feel much relieved if he could bind the two families' interests together. Such as, something like a marriage which would make his own daughter the queen. By the Redwater River, border area, City of Neverwinter. The sun was sinking into the mountains bit by bit, leaving the river afire with golden light. Smoke rose in front of the shacks, and a faint smell of porridge made Snaketooth's mouth begin to water. As he got closer, he could even smell meat. "I'm back." He caught Tigerclaw's attention as soon as he stepped into the battalion. Tigerclaw said, "Come up here quickly." Snaketooth swiftly walked to him and asked, "What? We have meat today?" "Yes, you come back late, so you've missed the message. This is granted by the Lord." Snaketooth rubbed his sore shoulders and said, "What for?" "You guys still need a long time to finish the construction of the residential area, right? It's for the completion of the Kingdom Main Street. Now the border area and the Longsong area are finally connected together. I've heard that now it takes only 1 day to get to the Longsong area riding a horse. In the past, it would take 3 days," someone nearby came up and said. Hearing that, Snaketooth nodded his head. Every time when a major project was finished, they would get a bowl of meat porridge, just like what he had heard before in the square. He had been in the border area for 2 months, during which the construction platoon had never cancelled a meal or deducted salaries. Now, he had already accumulated 14 silver royals and would get 7 more in the end of this month. When his savings reached 1 gold royal, he could get a house from the city hall and become an official resident of City of Neverwinter instead of a rat, a nobody. However, to own that house, he still had to work for at least 20 more years. Nevertheless, he was confident that he could find a better paid job, such as a furnace worker or a bricklayer. Everything seemed to get better. But he had not met Paper yet. "When you get the meat porridge, remember to eat fast. Otherwise, you can't get a good seat," Tigerclaw whispered in his ear. "What, seat?" Snaketooth was confused and asked. "To celebrate the completion of the Kingdom Main Street, a new drama will be played in the square. I heard it's called The City of Love and the star of Western Region will be on the stage too." "Oh my goodness. I can't wait to see it." "Go to see it with someone else." "I'm tired and don't feel like going anywhere today," Snaketooth said in low spirits. "Really? It's the premiere." Tigerclaw paused and then smiled meaningfully, adding, "All the locals know that the Lord will take the witches to see the premiere of the Starflower Troupe. Maybe you can see Paper there." Chapter 572, The Song of Praise. By the time when Snaketooth and Tigerclaw came to the square, a huge crowd of people had already gathered up there. Snaketooth had never seen so many people get together in one place, even when Longsong Stronghold was distributing relief grains. He counted roughly and estimated that there were probably over 5,000 people came to watch the play. The square, which used to be just a flat land, was changed into a giant, sunken bowl in the ground, which was called an amphitheater. According to the locals, this was the 3rd time that the square was rebuilt. Generally speaking, such a huge project would take 1 or 2 years to complete, but this amphitheater had been built in merely half a month, and during the time, nobody had ever seen where the soil dugout went. In this amphitheater, the audience could sit on the stone steps to watch the play, instead of standing until their legs were numb. It also enabled the audience to have a better view, as long as you could find a seat. As for those who came late, they could still stand on their tiptoes around the square to have a look. Tigerclaw squeezed into the last row of the stone stairs and made a space enough for 2 people, saying, "Not so bad. We still make it." Snaketooth clutched a cloth bag to his chest and sat beside his friend with great care. As the bag contained all his savings in the past 2 months, he had to be alert in such a crowded place. In the Longsong area, at places like this one, rats would be on the spree. Though the border area had no rats now, he still felt that he needed to watch out for the rats who were temporarily transferred to civilian work. When the last afterglow of the sunset melted into the darkness of the night, there were only several burning torches giving light to the square. The stage was still enveloped in darkness. Snaketooth could not help but feel quite strange when he found that nobody came to light up the bonfire and that there was no firewood in the center of the square. He could not help wondering how they were going to play without firelight. Suddenly, a bright beam of light shone on the stage. It was dazzling, but Snaketooth soon got used to this pure light. Then the second and the third beam of light appeared, gradually lighting up the stage. Gasps of amazement that were produced by the audience reverberated over the square. "They're the lights used in the plants," he thought. "Oh, my goodness! Nightless light. They bring nightless lights here." Rumor had it that it was a magic light that trapped the lightning of the sky in an expensive crystal glass bulb. Snaketooth had only seen it several times when he passed by the industrial district. Nightless light? Come on, it's called electric light and consumes electricity. It's made by the machines created by the witches. His Majesty planned to have every household equipped with electric lights, but the witch who provided electricity was unable to support so many lights. That's why only the plants are using this kind of lights now. Someone nearby snorted and said. "How do you know that?" Tiger Claw asked with interest. That person shrugged and said, "You aren't official residents of City of Neverwinter, right? The City Hall has done propaganda about electricity to tell us how to use the electric lights safely. They're like fire. If you don't use them properly, it'll cause disaster." Not like thunder? Almost the same. Don't bother so much. When you become subjects of His Majesty and finish the primary education, you'll understand. Is there any way that I can become a formal subject faster? What's the primary education? Snaketooth asked and wanted to ask more questions, but Tiger Claw suddenly grabbed him up when the crowd burst into deafening cheers. The Star Flower Troupe stepped on the stage. Ms. May. Ms. May. Ms. Irene. Mr. Gate. The crowd cried out the names of the troupe members and the atmosphere reached a crescendo. Seeing that, Snaketooth was filled with admiration suddenly. He wanted to become someone like them, the focus of people's eyes. He wanted the audience to cry out his name loudly. They were neither nobles nor sages. They were not out of reach. After the cheers died down, the play began. This was the first time for Snaketooth to watch a drama played by Star and Flower of the Western region. He never thought that he would be interested in such an elegant event usually enjoyed by the nobles, but when the music started, he was absorbed into the story without noticing it. The leading roles of the story were not the nobles. Instead, they were just ordinary people like himself, a free citizen, a refugee, and a rat. They had both dreams for their future and misfortunes in their own lives. They all fetched up simultaneously at the same city, Star City. They met and helped each other. They confided their thoughts to each other. They suffered from the pain of leaving their hometowns and the sense of loss in the new city. After that, they pulled themselves together and found their own ways. Nothing could be heard except the lines of the actors and actresses on the square. All the audience held their breath, as they were deeply involved in the story played on the stage. At last, the roles on the stage finally settled down in Star City and lived comfortably ever after. Strangers that had helped each other in the past became friends and lovers in the end. Snaketooth felt being touched when a moving music was played. He pretended to rub his eyes to hide his tears and meanwhile found out that Tiger Claw was all tears though he did not look sad. He was not the only one moved that much. Everyone around was just like him, lost in that moving story. No one had risen to cheer until the end of the play. Even if no one said it out, everyone knew it clearly that the Star City was City of Neverwinter. Snaketooth was lost in thought. Even a rat could have such a story? Right at the moment, a foreign-looking girl from behind the background plate stepped on the stage. Like someone in a delicate painting, she was tall and had waist-length long bluish-gray hair, wearing a white dress which glinted. She started to sing. Totally different from the music played before, her song was powerful, praising the great and glorious workers. She sang in a way different from all the other female singers. She was inspiring and encouraging. Hearing her song, Snaketooth felt that he could even see his own sweats in the distant residential buildings and that all the foreigners who devoted themselves into the construction of this city deserved to be remembered. The impact and emotions brought by the play were finally released at this moment. The audience flipped out and applauded with their greatest strength. The song promptly made their emotions run even higher. They were all His Majesty's subjects. The glorious workers. The builders of City of Neverwinter. After the show, His Majesty left with the witches via a raised platform which was built for temporary use. Snaketooth opened his eyes widely but still failed to find paper in the crowd. Surprisingly, he did not feel as disappointed as he expected, since the song still reverberated in his ears, filling his heart with hope. He believed that they would meet again sooner or later. Like those foreigners, they would meet again right in this city. Chapter 573, The Battle of Fallen Dragon Ridge. Boom! When the fire blasted out of the 152 shipboard artillery, Iron Axe felt the steel ship he stood on wobble slightly. A few seconds later, a cloud of smoke and dust exploded on the foreign city wall, and then the roar quieted down for a while. After all the smoke and dust dispersed, he looked through the telescope and found that there was a now big crack in the lower portion of the stone wall. Different from King City, Fallen Dragon Ridge seldom encountered attacks from external enemies, being located in the central south of the kingdom. Thus, its city wall was quite low, not even half as high as that of Longsong's stronghold. The narrow wall at the top allowed only one person to pass, and they could not set up large defense equipment like mangonels. Therefore, the artillery squad had expanded field artilleries to the open space 500 meters away from the wall. To make sure that the several hundred soldiers of the Vanguard Battalion could enter the city efficiently, Iron Axe decided to make 3 openings in the city wall before action. Any enemies trying to fill in and defend the open spots would be bombarded mercilessly by the 12-pound cannons. Now that the gate and the north wall had been chiseled through, he would make a final command to attack once they seized the last entrance. If only the witches could have come with the army, Iron Axe thought rather regretfully. It was a waste to use these precious shells on the stones. If Lady Nightingale were here, they would only need 3 packs of explosives to destroy the whole city wall. After all, their defense was much weaker than King City's. He was amused to realize the change in his belief. Half a year ago, he had insisted that the army should complete His Majesty's task independently. However, after conquering King City with the help of the Witch Union, it suddenly occurred to him that the perfect way to fight was to use witches as their eyes or commandos. "Sir," a soldier on the observatory shouted. "Attention to the gate. They seem to be gathering horses." Iron Axe looked at the ruined gate through his telescope. With limited vision, he could only vaguely see the dust behind the wall. "Do I need to adjust the naval artillery and fire in that direction?" Banner asked. "Not necessary. It'll waste at least 2 or 3 more shells." He shook his head and said, "Since they're horses, I think their plan is to gather knights and try to open the blockade line of field artillery through assault. There is nothing to worry about." While for you, Iron Axe turned back to see Countess Spear. "After this assault, I'm afraid there will not be many knights left in your domain. They decided to stand on my brother's side. These people are no longer my knights." She answered quietly. "That's the price they have to pay for their betrayal." "I see." Iron Axe paused for a moment and said, "Have you decided what to do with Redwine Passy?" Yesterday, he received a secret letter from the City Hall, which demanded all the noble except Spear's relatives to be escorted to City of Neverwinter. Anyone who resisted would be executed on the spot, and their domain would be blocked by the First Army. The officers from the City Hall would arrive and seize their properties. Based on that letter, the nobles would probably be sentenced to the mines with heavy labor. Currently several mines in Stronghold area lacked sufficient labor forces. There should be hundreds of people, including family members, cronies, and servants. It appeared there would be more iron ores in City of Neverwinter this year. As for the culprit, Redwine Passy, the letter instructed that he should be handed over to the Countess herself. The hesitation on Spear's face showed that she had not made a decision yet. Iron Axe sighed in silence. If he were her, he would chop off his head without hesitation. Nothing was more unforgivable than betrayal. "They're coming," the observer shouted suddenly. Putting aside these trifles, he continued to look at the battlefield through the telescope. As he had expected, a group of knights rushed out from the gate heading directly to the edge of the artillery field. The sound of gunshots suddenly echoed in the wilderness and forest. Puffs of smoke floated in the air in front of the battlefield. More than 20 knights and their squires fell down to the muddy ground in succession after rushing out less than 100 meters. If Duke Ryan had led his troops to attack Border Town, the knightage might have still been able to cause a small threat to the First Army by acting in unison. However, now these iron turtles were almost living targets with no ability to strike back. Revolving rifles and 2 HMGs, heavy machine gun alone could firmly block the enemies on their way to attack. The field artillery did not even need to reload with grape shots. After another round of shots from the naval artillery, the thin wall finally collapsed. Iron Axe commanded to blow the whistle and attack immediately. Soldiers in the vanguard battalion poured out from the alignment and separated into 3 groups targeting to the 3 openings. The battle for recovering fallen Dragon Ridge had officially been launched. 2 hours later, the First Army took the castles and churches. The enemies had been too frightened of the booming weapons for any resistance. The last batch of knights who were destroyed immediately when they left the gate were all the soldiers Redwine could gather. The church people did not show up at all, and all the goods and materials were cleared. Priest Rosad was also missing. There was no secret tunnel or hidden side door in Fallen Dragon Ridge, and there was no way to escape in a city of this kind, which was backed up by the mountains. Soldiers searched for the usurper and blocked him at the top level of the castle. Iron Axe commanded to take away the ministers who were on their knees begging for mercy and ordered the soldiers to leave Countess Spear and her brother alone in the chamber. Of course, Redwine was tied to the chair tightly, so he could not do any harm to the Countess. "I don't understand," Spear said after a long silence. "What can you gain by being the Lord? Our little brother, and you know nothing about administration or trading. Even if you sit in this position, you just hand over your power to other feudatories. You think I'm less important to you than those strangers, don't you? You're a witch, a demon's underling." Redwine craned his neck, crying. "Father was wrong about you. You cheated him. But I'm still your sister." "You aren't." He gritted his teeth and said, "You're just the bastard adopted by father." What? Spear was stunned. "I heard with my own ears when he was drunk. You were the mistake he made when he was young. And you aren't a passy." Redwine shouted with anger. "Why is it that you should inherit the family instead of me? I'm just taking back what was supposed to belong to me. You're the real stranger." Spear covered her head, but she could not remember anything about her childhood. The mistake he made? If not, why do you look so different from Mother? Can't you remember how you came to Fallen Dragon Ridge? So, you are not my brother either. Exactly, I'm the true heir of my family, the Earl of Fallen Dragon Ridge. Release me immediately. I demand to be treated as a nobleman." Spear stumbled out the chamber. Iron Axe held her promptly and said, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She took a deep breath. Send Redwine Passy to City of Neverwinter. He has lost his mind. The mine is where he should be." "As your wish." Iron Axe answered and nodded with agreement. Chapter 574, The Expansion of Education. Summer began with a heavy rain. Raindrops spattered on the windows, making the outside scenery a blur. One could only distinguish between the town and the remote mountains through the silhouette of the colors. Standing in front of the French window and looking at the blurry sceneries in the rain, Roland still felt the singing of the City of Love reverberating in his ears. He did not expect that, combined with Echo's ability, the first drama show performed 3 days ago could have such a striking effect. The whole room had fallen into silence when the show finished. The audience had been so touched that their eyes had been filled with tears. Roland thought this scene could only be seen in the high-end opera house of the era where he came from. Even the audiences in the commercial cinemas aimed at the masses of his era could seldom be moved that much, let alone the ordinary people who lived in this backward era. Even Roland himself, who had seen all the scenes that made people shed tears, could feel the shudder deep down in his heart. That was the strength of the resonance song. Roland recognized the importance of the inspirational singing during an enduring war in which the machines would not tire, but people would. Even if the guns and ammunition could be unceasingly transported to the battlefield, people would still be struck down by the endless pressure of survival, especially when the tide of battle was unfavorable and the army suffered heavy casualties. This kind of emotion was easily magnified, causing the soldiers to lose their faith in the ultimate victory. Throughout history, people had thought many methods to boost the morale of the army. This first type of method included making sure the soldiers could eat as much hot food as possible or airdropping ice cream. The second type was assigning a commissar or an army chaplain to go with the army. But these methods were impractical for Roland. The former required a very good logistical supply ability, and the latter was hard, in such a short period of time, to cultivate a group of core members who had strong faith that were also good at encouraging people. Echo's ability let him see a shortcut to boosting morale. It might sound a little absurd, but it was more reliable compared with other methods. While he was thinking, he heard a knock on the office's door, and then Bhairav walked in. "Your Majesty, the recent house purchase statistics are available now." "What's the result?" "Just as you expected." He excitedly unfolded a list on the mahogany table. Since the first night of the new drama, people who come to the city hall to apply for house renting and purchasing has significantly increased. Even the people who apply for marriage registration has increased a lot too. "Really?" Roland went back to the table to look at Bhairav's statistics. The City of Love was not just meaningless entertainment. Apart from advocating that labor was glorious and construction was great, it also transmitted another opinion which linked marriage with a stable residence. Instead of letting the outsiders develop a sense of belonging slowly and making the locals accept those foreigners step by step through daily contact, it was better if he set a simple standard himself to advance the fusion of the refugees. That standard was housing. "You're one of us if you have a house in our place." This saying might seem a bit rude, but it saved a lot of time in this special period. To gain people's recognition and build up their own families, the foreigners had to have a house. And once they owned real estate here, they would defend everything in this place voluntarily. Of course, these ideas were unsuitable to speak out directly, but they would be naturally borne in mind by the audience seeing the drama stories. It was just like diamonds. The classics advertising verbals "a diamond lasts forever" made it the king of jewelry, and everyone would want one when they got married, making people completely forget its true nature, which was not rare or precious. Compared with diamonds, housing at least was far more practical. However, in order to realize his goals, he could not set a too high standard, making people feel it was impossible to reach. In his city, now people could apply for renting a house with 1 gold royal, and after that, they only needed to pay 1 gold royal as rent every year. When the rent they paid equaled to the house price, the house would belong to the renter spontaneously. The target was not easy to achieve, as even the cheapest single room would cost 20 gold royals. That meant all the workers, for example, the temporary workers and handymen, would take 20 years to afford such a house, which was less than 15 square meters and could only contain 1 bed, 1 table, and 1 bathroom. People would call him a black-hearted realtor in the era where Roland came from. All in all, according to Bhairav's statistics, the City of Love was undoubtedly successful in promoting his idea. Most of the renting applications came from the several batches refugees and serfs who arrived in the border area first, and house purchase requests were mostly proposed by the craftsmen with higher salaries and the broken nobles who had carried properties with them. After they all settled down here, they would become part of the city of Neverwinter forever. Based on this successful experience, Roland had already figured out the contents of a new drama whose theme was getting married and working hard to buy a big house. Well done. He rolled up the list and gave it to Bhairav. Besides, the recent solicitation of the refugees should continue to expand its scope. The plentiful population is the base for the development of the city of Neverwinter, and other tasks can be put aside for it. "Yes, Your Majesty." Bhairav laughed till his mustache was curled up. "By the way, go and get Scroll. I have something to tell her." "Your Majesty, did you want to see me?" Scroll walked into the office in a black skirt and white blouse, looking very capable. "I want to expand the education scope, which will cover the refugees who have just arrived at the city of Neverwinter." Roland poured a cup of tea for her. "If the education only aims at the official citizens, the refugees would have to wait at least one more year to receive primary education. I'm afraid this is untenable now, Scroll said after several minutes' consideration. There are too many of them. The current teacher couldn't take care of them all, and the classrooms are not enough either. If we do as you ask, the number of the education ministry's staff would need to be doubled or tripled. I have a method which can reduce the teacher's pressure. Roland paused for a while and continued, let them study by themselves. Self-study? Yes, every week we give one public lecture which only teaches them the basic reading and writing, and let them use the booklets with pictures and pronunciations to do some exercises by themselves in the rest of the time. There are no achievement tests and no mandatory requirements, and they learn according to their own free will. She ran her fingers through her hair which was soaked wet by the rain unconsciously. It's unlikely to have any effect. Your Majesty, without supervision, 9 out of 10 people won't learn well. It doesn't matter. I just want to offer them an opportunity, Roland laughed and said. There was always someone who was unsatisfied with boring, low-paid jobs and was eager to achieve their goals quickly. In order to prevent these people from stepping aside, he must guide them to improve themselves in the right way. In the future, more and more jobs would have literacy requirements, and the salaries for these jobs would be much higher than the handyman's. Given that, for those who wanted to buy a house and get rid of their poor and exhausting lives, it would be a better choice for them to learn how to read and write by themselves. Through this method, those hard-working people could participate in the city's construction quickly. To keep the new regime's vitality, the most important thing was never, ever blocking the way of promotion from the bottom layer. That was what Roland believed. Chapter 575, Wendy's Expectation. Wendy woke up and found that after a whole night, the rain had finally stopped. She yawned and got out of the bed. The moment she pushed open the window, the sweet fragrance of wet soil swarmed into the room. After the rainfall, the garden was a bright shade of green and she could see droplets of water falling from the olive leaves near the window. The morning's gentle sunshine shone on the wet grass, reflecting gleams of light. A new day had begun. After putting on her undergarments and coat, she went back to the bedside and patted Nightingale's cheeks, saying, "Time to get up." Nightingale gave an obscure snort, and buried her face in the pillow. Only in times like this, would she expose herself defenselessly, instead of hiding in the mist. Wendy smiled and shook her head. "Then I'll go eat breakfast first." Nightingale's ears moved slightly, like unconscious trembles, but Wendy knew she had heard. She gently closed the door and went to the bathroom to wash up before she walked toward the hall to enjoy breakfast. The chefs always woke up extremely early since they had to prepare food for everyone before daybreak. The firewood in the oven could burn for a long time, so there was no need to worry about the food getting cold halfway. If she wanted to eat something, she could just grab a bowl and spoon and fetch it in the kitchen. His Majesty said it was called buffet and it seemed to be a very common dining style for him, but for her, this kind of life could be called extravagant. In the Witch Cooperation Association, Wendy had never thought that one day she could eat as much as she wanted. Back then they were lucky to have sufficient food to eat, let alone to pay any attention to the taste, as the food was never enough. But now, there were 3 or 4 dishes just for breakfast every day, such as porridge, toast, dried fish and fried eggs. Even though she had been living in the castle for nearly a year, she still felt extreme satisfaction and happiness every time she ate. Meanwhile, she was very grateful to the person who had brought all these things to the witches and let her sisters live a free life. When Wendy picked up her bowl in the dining room, there was no one in the hall, just several used plates on the long table. Obviously, she was not the first to eat. The Witch Union had never set a time to wake up, so everyone came to enjoy breakfast one after another. Lightning and Maggie were always the first to leave the castle, followed by another group including Anna, Agatha, Lucia, and others. She was usually between the two. Nightingale was always the last. This was because His Majesty loved to sleep late. When there was nothing urgent, he would get up at noon to deal with the government affairs. Nightingale was influenced by him. She had once been the most discreet and acute person in the Witch Cooperation Association, alerted by even a small movement. However, Wendy did not think this was a bad thing. After breakfast, she went to the first floor of the witch building. This place had been transformed into the witch union's office. Ring walked toward her as soon as she entered. "Sister Wendy, you're here." "Hello, Lady Wendy." "Good morning, ladies." Another two young women from the city hall bowed to her. They had graduated from the institute, which was originally founded by Carl van Bate. They barely counted as Anna's and Nana's classmates and had no prejudice towards witches. The older one was Pearl and the younger one was Grey Rabbit. Together with Lucia's little sister Ring, they formed the first clerks of the witch unions. Of course, since Ring was under 14, she was just a fill-in for now. Anyway, the jobs here were very easy, and she could consider it as extra education. With the clerk's help, the witch union was finally getting on track. "Good morning." Wendy nodded, sitting by the desk. "How are the sales of the first volume of the Witch Diaries?" "Very popular," Pearl smiled and said, "and people love the story of Border Town's little angel, especially the soldiers from the First Army. They come to buy it almost every day. This week we almost sold more than 60 copies a day. At this rate, we may sell out the 1,000 copies we originally printed within half a month." Hearing that, Wendy was a little surprised. After all, as a book which was purely for entertainment, The Witch Diaries could not feed people or help them with their studies, but yet it could sell this well at such a high price. It was incredible. The idea was originally put forward by His Majesty. As a drama trilogy with an intricate plot and moving stories, The Witch Diaries had been praised by the city of Neverwinter's subjects. So, His Majesty decided to follow the pattern of the drama and illustrate the witch's life stories in the form of pictures to sell it in the convenience market's boutique. But unlike the drama, this time all the major characters in the stories were witches from the Union, and apart from the exquisite pictures, it also had some designed dialogues, making the readers feel as if they were watching a real drama play on the paper. The main character of the first volume was Miss Nana Pine. The 15-year-old girl had already been very famous in Border Town, with the ability to heal the pain of others and her natural affinity. No one could hate such an angel. Coupled with His Majesty's strong supportive attitude towards witches, as well as the First Army's spread of her stories, she was even more popular than Anna. After Wendy decided the plot of the stories, Soraya painted them one by one and stapled the book together. It sold for 5 silver royals per book. It was the refugees who needed to know about the witches most, but many refugees could not read and they were not interested in buying an exquisite album with half a month's salary. So, in the beginning, the potential buyers were locals and businessmen who came here to do business. The former could spread the stories through the contact with foreigners and the latter could bring them to every city in the kingdom. After seeing how popular The Witch Diaries was, Wendy felt inspired. She could hardly wait to get the pen and paper, and was starting to think about the contents of the next volume. "Have you considered the content of the next stories?" Ring asked curiously. "Yes, His Majesty said Echo will be the major character of the next volume," Wendy smiled and said, "And what do you think of this title, The Silver Moon Princess from the Southernmost Region, the Land of Swirling Sand and Volcanoes?" "Wow! It's awesome!" the little girl exclaimed, smacking her lips. "When His Majesty recaptures the Southern Territory, you can go to the princess's hometown to see the vast desert." Wonderful. It was her job, spreading stories about the witches and letting everyone know who they really were. The Witch Diaries was just a part of it. Echo had already gotten acquainted with the Starflower Troupe, and all the actors were full of praises for her immersive music. Evelyn had opened a tavern next to the Holy Mountain Hotel, mainly offering mixed liquor with a unique flavor. Hummingbird also joined the City Hall and became the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Construction, and she was also the second witch officer in the City Hall next to Scroll. The witches all worked very hard to build the city of Neverwinter. At the same time, they also made people accept their existence and equally treat them. Wendy felt that the day which His Majesty had promised was just within their reach. Chapter 576, Deep Inside the Palace. Otto Luashi and Oro Tokat lurked behind a rockery, in the palace garden, in the city of Glow. the Kingdom of Dawn. Of course, they were not completely sneaking. At least when entering the palace, they had passed through the door, right under the guards' noses. No guard would stop them from visiting any place in the palace, except for the forbidden areas, because all the guards knew that the Luoxis and the Tokats had always been loyal supporters of the royal family, and that these two young men would become the ministers of the eldest prince when they took over their respective families. "Hey, are you sure about this?" Otto could not help but feel nervous. If the Dawn Castle where the King of Dawn spent time was a forbidden zone, his bedroom was even more forbidden. However, they happened to know a secret way from the garden to his bedroom. This narrow underground channel which they had explored with Andrea and Prince Appin in their childhood was meant to be one of the escape routes from the palace. They had considered it their own secret base and held small parties there occasionally. Given that they were only 10 years old at that time, the worst punishment, even if they were found by His Majesty Moya, would have been being blamed. Now as grown-ups, if they entered the palace without permission, what would His Majesty think? "Come on." Gathering the three families to find out the reason why Appin has been acting strange, isn't that the plan? Oro twitched his lips. "And now, at this crucial time, you want to flinch?" Otto opened his mouth but he was speechless. "But how stupid you are. To get messages from Quinn, you told him Andrea's recent situation. If you weren't Andrea's childhood sweetheart, the old man would have killed you," Oro said while looking around, "and now is the best time to tell the truth, will you do it or not?" After a moment's hesitation, Otto gritted his teeth and nodded. What Earl Quinn had told them was astonishing. Since His Majesty had fallen ill, the prince often met with an alchemist in the palace, casting his visitors out. It was said that a special drug from the alchemy could resist disease and enabled His Majesty to remain awake for 1 or 2 hours a day. As the Prime Minister, Andrea's father naturally had access to the palace to obtain political suggestions from His Majesty. The old man had gotten a glimpse of the alchemist and to his great surprise, he saw that it was actually a young woman, covered with a black veil, only her bleak silver-gray eyes showing. At this description, Otto immediately thought of the church. If it were not for his recent trip to the Kingdom of Grey Castle, he would not think this way. After meeting with Roland Wimbledon, the messages about the church secretly training pure witches, attempting to subvert the 4 kingdoms and accumulating its power to resist the Battle of Doomsday had rooted in his mind. He did not tell what he knew from Roland to Earl Quinn. After all, the impact of the news was so huge that he must confirm his conjecture before deciding the next step. Hearing from the Earl that the alchemist would appear today, Otto immediately thought of the secret channel from his childhood. Now that it was impossible to get the support of the eldest prince, this was his only way to discover the truth. With this thought, he nodded to Oro, who immediately poked the knee-high weeds, using a dagger to pry a cover disguised as a stone from behind the rockery. Rusty steel bars appeared in front of them. The fence, which could only be opened from the inside, was about an arm length in width, but this was not a problem for the two who were fully prepared. Oro took a glass bottle from his pocket, opened the lid and poured the tawny liquid onto the lock catch. A puff of pungent white smoke rose up and the steel bars gave off a sizzling sound, like butter being thrown into a hot pot. The liquid was the iron-melting water created by a master alchemist of the City of Glow, and a fist-sized bottle cost more than 10 gold royals. Oro was told that iron would become molten in the blink of an eye when using it. But this was not the case. The lock catch first shrunk in half and did not fall off the fence until he had used up the second bottle. The two men bent over to enter the hole, and Oro did not forget to turn around and close the slates. After they had crawled more than 10 steps, the channel became slightly spacious, and they could walk. Otto skillfully fumbled for the oil lamp hung on the wall, flaming it with flint. The faint light illuminated the cliffs and the arched ceiling. This place was still the same even after more than 10 years, as if time stood still here. When passing by the lounge halfway, they could still see the soft seats and wine glasses they had dragged here for parties. The road began to shift upwards and Otto Luashi knew that they had entered the Dawn Castle. Castle walls were divided into 2 layers, just like a sandwich. The middle part between the 2 layers was reserved for secret chambers and tunnels. Finally, the two arrived at the end of the secret channel, which was the very back of the fireplace in the bedroom of the king. As the mechanism needed to be opened from inside, they could not walk directly into the bedroom. But they could roughly see the scene in the bedroom through the small gap in the trapdoor. The voices of conversation in the room could be heard if it was quiet enough. Otto blew out the oil lamp and peeked through the gap. The King of Dawn, His Majesty Degan Moya, was lying in bed facing the fireplace. And Appin, the eldest prince, was pacing by the bedside, looking worried. They looked at each other, then tacitly nodded and carefully leaned against the door. It was obvious that His Highness was waiting for the alchemist. About an hour later, there was a sound in the room. They immediately turned their heads, squinting. Two women walked into the bedroom. One was the black-veiled alchemist that Earl Quinn had mentioned, and the other was probably the alchemist's assistant. She carried a satchel, wore a red and white cope and cloak, and had beautiful golden curly hair. "You're late," Appin said, displeased. "Sorry," the blonde bowed and answered, "we were delayed by an unexpected situation on the way." "There's no need to explain. All we need to do is to wake his father up. It doesn't matter whether we arrive early or late." The woman in the black veil said this with an icy voice. "You shouldn't say that. We still need the help of His Highness." The blonde took out a green porcelain bottle from her satchel. "It's good for both of us to maintain a harmonious relationship, isn't it? Give me the medicine." Appin took 2 steps toward them, but was stopped by the woman dressed in black veil. "Did you forget our agreement? This medicine is only effective if fed by me, and in exchange, you must meet the requirements of His Holiness." "His Holiness?" Otto was shocked. This honorific could only be used to name the Pope. He wondered whether they were really sent by the Church. He could not help but bite his lip. Apparently, they were not alchemists, but pure witches instead. Chapter 577, The Silent Massacre. "I remember a month ago I told you to close the way to Kingdom of Wolfheart as soon as possible. Why are there still so many refugees flocking in?" the black-veiled witch said wryly, "and your knights should have arrived at the border by now. You know clearly that there are a large number of refugees." Appin clenched his fists and said, "If they were prohibited from crossing the border, most of them would die from starvation. There are no cities nearby, and no places to provide food. It'll take at least a week to go back to Wilderness Town if they retract their original steps, and they—" "Does that have anything to do with you?" the black-veiled witch interrupted impatiently. "If they suffer from starvation or thirst, they have only themselves to blame. After all, they've abandoned their kingdom. And you'd better pay attention to your father. Or do you want to breach the deal? They abandoned their kingdom? Ridiculous," Otto thought, with a burst of anger. It's the person like the black-veiled witch who has waged the war, displacing these people. When it came to a breach of the deal, Appin showed obvious hesitation. After a while he said, "The rest of the road will be closed in a week. I hope you're satisfied with such a result. However, if they cross the border through the wildlands or the mountain ridges instead of walking through the official road, it's none of my business. Of course, I won't ram an impossible mission down your throat." The black-veiled girl took the porcelain bottle and sipped. She walked up to the bed and bent down to feed the elixir to the King of Dawn with her mouth. Otto and Oro, who were hiding in the path behind the fireplace, stared at her but saw nothing. After a while, she lifted her head and said, "The King of Dawn will recover as usual in an hour." "Does the elixir have to be fed from your mouth?" "Yes, it'll only work if fed by my mouth." She shrugged and said, "As long as you comply with the agreement, you can feel relieved knowing that the King of Dawn will recover totally, even much healthier than before. The next time we come back the border is to be completely closed." The blonde-haired woman smiled. "Do not let His Holiness down, Your Highness." Just as they turned to leave, Appin suddenly asked, "You're witches, aren't you?" "And?" The 2 witches stopped abruptly. "Is it because of the magic power of a witch that the elixir can only be fed by you?" he said slowly, and no other reason could explain this. Although the existence of witches within the Church is incredible, all you have done is nothing different from the demons. Are you sure you want to say this? Come out. The prince shouted. The prince's words gave Otto and Oro a scare, but what they saw were several royal guards with light armor appearing from the closet and under the bed. The pure witches were hemmed in by a flock of guards. Oh, the blonde witch gave a whistle and said, "What an admirably reckless move. And it makes no sense." The black-veiled witch shook her head. It appears that the church doesn't leave you with a great impression. Do not bluff. Appin roared. Your God's punishment warriors are indeed a miracle and are unimaginably strong. However, they're not here. We have God's stone in the palace, as many as we want. Do you think you'll have any chance to flee away? Wait. The blonde witch smacked her lips and asked, Are the witches we have encountered along the way your arrangement? Those aren't real witches, they're tricks the rats often used. Appin suddenly snapped as if the long-repressed rage was finally coming unleashed. A handful of magic firestones should give us a clear picture of your strength. Are there any differences between the witches and the common people without the protection of God's punishment warriors? It's not too late to beg for mercy if you hand over the elixir. Just do as I've said. Otherwise, we'll break your arms and legs, and pull out your teeth. You'll become humanoid pots to hold elixir. The others will be very angry if they hear your words. She sighed. Young bloke, you should neither doubt the existence of witches nor laugh at their power. You'd better not let her see you next time, or you may have a very rough time. What? The pure witch's deprecating attitude just infuriated the prince further. Hope you can stay so stubborn in the prison. Guards, take them down. Otto stuck his face tightly to the flagstone in the hope of seeing more, but his body was soon stiff. He was too surprised to believe his eyes. Before the guards could touch the pure witch, they changed the direction of the blades and committed suicide. In a flash, blood bubbled and spurted out everywhere. The guards fell to the ground, silently. The smell of blood pervaded the room immediately. However, Appin trembled ceaselessly as if he had seen something extremely horrible. The previous confidence and rage dissipated instantly. Urine trickled down his legs as he pissed his pants in fear. Let him go, the blonde witch shrugged and said, he's still useful for us. Just a little lesson, the black-veiled witch said and snapped her fingers. The elder prince sat down on the ground like awakening from a dream. He rocked back and forth trembling. Don't worry, you're still alive. She satirized. But I can't guarantee you'll be so lucky next time. Why? How? Here, we have God's stone of retaliation, Appin said stutteringly. How could the witches? Because we're pure witches, the blonde witch said with a hint of a smile on her face. Why don't you comply with the agreement? Your father will be safe, and the existence of Kingdom of Dawn will be extended. You can remain a member when the church defeats Kingdom of Grey Castle. Even though your kingdom will be under the governing of the church, you can still live a well-to-do life, and your subjects can be free from the war. Are there any benefits to doing these silly things? And, don't forget to clean up the spot. Your father will wake up soon. Presumably, you don't want him to face such a bloody scene when he wakes up, she added as she left. Otto felt his back soaked with cold sweat. He chilled at the thought of the pure witches who had no fear of the God's stone, and the church's plan to capture Kingdom of Grey Castle and to take over Kingdom of Dawn. As His Majesty Roland said, the church had taken the 4 kingdoms as a safe bet. Appin was the only one left in the room when the King of Dawn woke up. The blood-soaked carpet was covered with cloth. He fed his father oatmeal spoon by spoon. He seemed to forget his illness, chatting desultorily about government and family affairs with Appin. It appeared as if there were no changes. Otto dared not catch his breath at the sight of this quirky scene. Oro and Otto did not leave the hidden path until dusk fell. What should we do? Oro, who had always been unflappable, questioned, panic leaking into his voice. Tell all these things to Earl Quinn, and our parents. He gritted his teeth. The problem is beyond our capability. But you've seen the pure which resist God's stone. What difference does it make if our families and Earl Quinn know the truth? I know someone who can deal with them. Otto looked at his friend and said slowly, we can ask for the help. Have a messenger of Kingdom of Grey Castle send the news to His Majesty Roland Wimbledon. Chapter 578, A Life or Death Report. Yorko's life had been very comfortable of late. With the King of Dawn still to recuperate, Prince Roland seemed to have forgotten about him as well. It was only the nobles who did not ignore this ambassador from a neighboring country. He attended extravagant banquets and indulged in various pleasures with Denise, who even introduced him to exclusive clubs and brothels. The abundance and unique flavors of the capital were things he would never be able to enjoy in Grey Castle. His current life was only made possible because of his title as Wimbledon's royal ambassador. Although his rank was equivalent to an earl, yet in certain ways, he possessed more advantages than an earl. The latter could only do as he pleased within his own fief, while the former could enjoy the privileges of an upper noble in the other kingdoms as well. This clearly showed him the benefits that status accorded. The bodyguard assigned him to by His Majesty, named Hill Fox, was also a peculiar person. Whenever Yorko made contact with a new person, Hill would sneak into that person's bedroom within the following 3 nights and later inform Yorko about that person's identity, status, and interests. If the person was a big shot, nearly everything about his life, including his hobbies, could be found out. With Hill's assistance, Yorko was able to mingle within the noble community even more smoothly. Furthermore, Hill's arrangements allowed him to make considerable progress on his plan to purchase slaves. Once, after a great night in bed with Denise, he mentioned this plan to her and she immediately agreed to his idea. The existing caravan would be used to establish a slave trading route, through which he would purchase the refugees required by His Majesty from the other slave traffickers, and transport them to Grey Castle where they would be resold. The condition was that the slaves had to each be given an identity as a free citizen, and not be treated merely as goods for resale. Of course, merchants were merchants after all. Even at a time of pleasure, they did not forget to negotiate the price. While Denise would not charge a commission, Yorko would have to cover all of the transportation expenses. After factoring in the manpower costs, meal costs, vehicle fees, and other expenses, he calculated that the selling price of each slave had to be set at 10 silver royals in order for the business to reach his desired profit. When Hill entrusted him with this task, he assuredly accepted and proclaimed that he would not let any more talented people end up as slaves. His attitude undoubtedly deepened Denise's attraction to him. After concluding the brief negotiation, the two of them returned to the bed for another passionate romp. In the following days, Yorko sent Hill to negotiate with the other parties involved so that he did not have to take care of these trivial business matters himself. Soon, when he heard that the first batch of slaves, comprising of 25 people, had been purchased the previous day, he realized that it made him eligible for the 125 silver royals which His Majesty had promised as a reward. Is there another job where I can make money just by lying in bed? Being an ambassador is simply awesome. Just as Yorko was deliberating over where to go for fun today, a servant knocked on the door and walked into the room. Your Excellency, the eldest son of the Luashi family, Lord Otto, wishes to meet you. Otto Luashi? Yorko was familiar with this name. He knew that Luashi was one of the 3 powerful families of King City of Kingdom of Dawn, and was only second in power to the Moya royal family. Denise had even warned him that he was free to court any woman except those of these 3 families, especially the Quinn family. His status as an ambassador would be insufficient to protect him in that case. Yorko did not have to worry that this was the reason, as he had paid great caution in all of his love affairs. Perhaps, he has come to invite me to another banquet? Bring him in. A young man entered the study. He first took a good look around the place, and then closed the windows in the room on his own initiative before he sat down on the chair intended for him. His expression looked somewhat anxious. The dark circles under his eyes revealed that he had stayed up late and not slept much the previous night. Yorko was against the idea of emptying one's vitality for the sake of enjoyment. In his opinion, the abstemious sexual pleasure was beneficial as it made both partners happy and healthy. In contrast, depleting all of one's energy in bed would harm one's physical potential in the long term. Prince Appin was a clear example of this. His face had turned completely pale, and if he did not change his ways, he would be incapable of seeking pleasure by the time he turned 30. The young man did not say anything for a long time. This surprised Yurko. It felt discourteous, especially coming from one of the three families. He waited for a while before he decided to break the silence. Greetings. You should be Lord Audiobook. What brings? You're able to contact His Majesty Roland Wimbledon, right? The young man suddenly snapped. I have an important report for him. Yurko was puzzled. What report? It's all written in here. Otto took out a letter, placed it in front of Yurko, and added 10 gold royals on top of it. And this money is for reward. Please make sure that this letter reaches your king. The information concerns the survival of Kingdom of Grey Castle. Yurko inhaled a mouthful of cold air. The survival of Kingdom of Grey Castle? This has to be an exaggeration. Otto continued to stare at him with gleaming eyes until he collected his wits and replied, I understand. Don't worry, I'll do as you say and deliver this to His Majesty. Make sure it's done as soon as possible. After exhorting Yurko repeatedly, Otto got up and departed. His anxious demeanor clearly suggested that he was not lying. Yurko hastily kept the 10 gold royals in his pocket. Instead, he left the letter untouched. He was aware that it had to be handled with great caution and thus it was best to ask Hill for advice first. At night, when Hillfox entered his bedroom, Yurko went through what happened during the day. After listening to Yurko's account, Hill pondered for a while before he pulled out a small knife and cleanly opened the letter. What are you doing? Yurko exclaimed in shock. Opening a letter intended for His Majesty is a grave offense. Shoo! Hill made a gesture to keep quiet. If the information is truly as important as he claims, it would be wrong for us to use conventional means to deliver this letter. A messenger from City of Dawn to Western Region will take at least a month, while bad situations may occur on the road. It'd be too risky. What has that got to do with opening the letter? Do you remember the gray falcons I've been keeping? They're the fastest couriers of all. They can reach City of Dawn within 2 to 3 days. Hill explained. At City of Dawn, they'll pass the letter to another group of falcons, and within a week, His Majesty will be able to receive it. However, they're unable to carry such a large envelope. After I've read the contents, I'll rewrite the letter as a secret letter. Gray falcons are able to send letters like carrier pigeons? Yurko was astonished. I'd thought you raised them for hunting. They're much smarter than pigeons. Hill remarked. He then opened the letter and soon his expression turned grim. Who would think something like this could happen? What's written in it? Do you really want to know? Hill turned his head. Never mind. Yurko coughed twice. I'd rather be able to sleep well tonight. A wise choice. Hill approved. Also, it's best you don't mention to anyone that Audiobook came to find you. All banquets in the palace should be cancelled or postponed for now. He paused briefly before revealing. They're in deep trouble. Chapter 579, 2 Incoming Letters. Roland received a letter from Calvin Comte, Duke of the Northern Region. It was accompanied by a fingerprinted memorandum that expressed the Northern Region's intent of loyalty to His Majesty. The letter itself talked about more trivial matters. First, it asked when Roland would stage his accession ceremony, so that the Duke could prepare his journey to attend. This was the convention every time a new king was soon to be coronated. The next question asked about the new policies, such as how they should be enforced, what the remaining powers of the nobles were, how succession arrangements should be made and what the management scope of the city hall should be. These questions were predictable. But it was the last question which surprised Roland. At the end of the letter, the Duke proposed a connection through marriage. An entire page was dedicated to extolling the beauty and talent of his daughter, Edith. It also claimed that she would be able to handle all kinds of issues and affairs, whether they were domestic or foreign, and therefore, she was the most suitable candidate to be queen. Roland laughed heartily as he read through this section of the letter. "What are you laughing about?" Nightingale's voice came from the direction of the deck chair. "A very interesting, father." He raised the letter. "Have a look at this." Nightingale came out of her mist, took the letter from Roland, and read it. Then she frowned and asked, "You won't agree to it, will you?" "Of course not," Roland replied lightheartedly. "I don't need marriage connections to preserve the stability of my throne. Furthermore, the letter makes her sound so able that I won't even dare to let her into the castle. Or else, it may become unclear who the king is." "You do sound truthful," Nightingale remarked and visibly sighed in relief. "Hey, don't you believe me?" "It's not that I don't believe you, but you know that witches can't." She paused for a moment before continuing. "After our awakenings, we can't be considered complete women anymore." "I don't think that way." Roland shook his head in disagreement. To him, the social perception that infertility was a defect would be expunged as civilization gradually progressed. Conversely, the beautiful appearances, attractive physiques, and incredible abilities which magic power could bring about would become increasingly important and desirable over time. As long as mankind lived on, witches would inevitably rise up as a group. Fortunately, they could be born in normal humans, and furthermore, there was no specific method to trigger an awakening. These thus allowed witches and normal humans to live and work together or perhaps even to marry. Just as Roland was about to expound at length on his personal view of witches, a gray falcon flew into the room through an open window and perched on Roland's desk with a loud thump. A loop of yellow cloth was tied around its claws. This meant that it was a secret letter which arrived from the old king's city. Roland swallowed his words, took a piece of dried fish out of a drawer, and tossed it to the gray falcon which was already waiting for its reward. Then he unwound the cloth and took out the neatly folded oil paper from within. As the size of the secret letter was limited, the contents written on it had to be extremely concise. The first sentence of the letter was enough to give Roland a huge shock. "The palace of Kingdom of Dawn has been infiltrated by the pure witch who can defy the god stone of retaliation to use their abilities." Witches who were immune to the influence of the god stone? As far as Roland knew, only two kinds of beings could do this. The first was extraordinaries with their enhanced bodies, while the second was senior demons that were called supermagic. As Roland continued reading, he realized that each successive line of news got more and more shocking. When Prince Appin attempted to resist the pure witch, they manipulated his guards to slit their own throats. The Church's aim is to establish firm control over the Kingdom of Dawn before it places full concentration on attacking the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Otto Luashi and Oro Tokat witnessed everything that took place. The three families hope to receive your kind aid. Roland suddenly realized that his plans to recapture southernmost region would have to be adjusted substantially. 3 days passed. Roland convened a strategy discussion meeting in the castle's reception room. The attendees included City Hall Director, Barav, Commander of the First Army, Iron Axe, Chief Knight, Carter, Longsong Stronghold Consul, Petrov, Witch Union representatives, Wendy and Agatha, a representative of Sleeping Island's witches, Sylvie, and lastly, Pearl of the Northern Region, Edith. That's the current situation, basically speaking. Roland concluded after recounting the contents of the secret letter to the attendees. Although we're unable to verify the information, if everything written in the letter is to be believed, the Kingdom of Grey Castle shall unquestionably face its biggest challenge before the next battle of divine will. After some consideration, I've decided that the southernmost region's battle arrangements have to be temporarily suspended. He glanced towards Iron Axe. Will that be okay? As the chief commander of the spring offensive, Iron Axe had swiftly seized Willow Town and Fallen Dragon Ridge according to plan, and thus gave Roland control over the gateway towns that connected the city of Neverwinter and the Southern Territory. Iron Axe had intended to build on this success by completing the territorial expansion before autumn arrived. This would include bringing the Sand Nation under the domain of Roland's kingdom. The two people who would then be responsible for establishing good relations between the two races were Echo and Iron Axe. As both of them belonged to the Majin clan, they could serve as mediators in a racial conflict. Iron Axe had especially yearned to return to Iron Sand City to take revenge for being framed. Hence, allowing him to lead the troops to seize the southernmost region was the best reward that Roland could have given him. Now that the battle plans were suspended, it was understandable if he was disappointed. "Yes, Your Majesty." Iron Axe did not reveal any expression, and his reply was as sure as ever. "I suggest that we let the newly trained soldiers take the place of the First Army soldiers stationed at Fallen Dragon Ridge. They'll have no problems dealing with the nobles there, while this would allow the First Army to gather its greatest strength to fight against the Church." "We'll do exactly that." Roland nodded approvingly before he stood up and walked in front of the large map. "Presently, we face two main problems. The first is that we don't know when the enemy will attack. The second is that we don't know where they'll attack from. The Church used to have only one route to invade the Kingdom of Grey Castle. This would be traveling directly south through Coldwind Ridge to reach King City. However, now that the Church controls the Kingdom of Dawn, it's possible that the Judgment Army will attack us through their border. Does anyone have a good idea how we can cope with this? No matter where they appear from, they'll first have to go through the northern region." Bhairav was first to speak. "Coldwind Ridge, Deep Valley Town, City of Evernight and Palisade City, all of these are places administered by Duke Calvin. I suggest that we allow Miss Edith to go back and inform her father about this. We'll then keep a lookout for enemies in the northern region. This is the most secure way." "But, Your Majesty," the City Hall director rubbed his hands together. "Do we truly stand a chance against the Church?" This foolish question was badly received by everyone present. Edith unceremoniously replied, "If His Majesty says that we don't have a chance, are you going to wag your tail at the Church and beg for mercy? What nonsense are you talking? As the City Hall director, I have to make contingency plans for the worst that can happen." Edith ignored him and turned towards Roland. "Your Majesty, while it's indeed necessary to send people to monitor every road in the north, it won't be an effective method on its own. The response will be slow, and by the time enemies are discovered, it'll mean that they have already begun to act. This'll give you very little time to respond. Do you have a better plan?" "Of course," Edith replied confidently. "We should send people to Hermes." "The Church's holy city?" Carter frowned in disdain. "What use would that be? Do you think the Pope will inform you when he dispatches his army? Also, the people living there are believers and zealots. It'll be difficult for spies to blend in." Petrov added. "There's no need to enter the holy city." Edith laughed. "All we need to do is to have a nice chat with a nearby merchant." Chapter 580, The Tooth Extraction Campaign. "Tell me more." Roland could not help becoming interested in Edith's idea. The terrain of Hermes is very unique. There's a slope around this area of the impassable mountain range. The old part of the holy city is located at the lower end of the slope, while the new part is built on a plateau on the higher end. The environment there is very harsh. Although there are natural barriers that keep demonic beasts away, the highland isn't really suitable for living, let alone for cultivating and farming. Thus the food and supplies of the new holy city have to be provided by the old one, despite the fact that the latter's mass land can only produce enough supplies for the 20,000 or so people living downhill. Edith walked to Roland's side, pointed at the map, and continued, "This means that they have to gather supplies from other places. For example, they would buy plots of land from churches and related organizations in nearby cities. Or they would rent wheat fields for farming. Every year during autumn, dozens of horse carriages would arrive from the four kingdoms every day to provide supplies to the new holy city. The old holy city has become something like a market town where these carriages may rest, as well as a checkpoint where the Church can control the flow of people in and out of the new city. In other words, whenever they mobilize the Judgment Army, the merchants here would definitely witness it. In fact, even before the army acts, we can observe changes in the transportation of supplies to deduce when they'll move out. The young woman spoke as if she was taking part in a modern-day oratorical competition. Her eyes routinely swept across everyone present to make sure that they were paying attention to herself. The level of confidence she displayed was rarely seen in women of her era. Roland silently thought to himself, perhaps what Calvin Kant wrote in the letter isn't all boastful bullsh*t. Judging from Edith's manner, she is indeed worthy of being called Pearl of the Northern Region. How do you know all of this so well? Berev stroked his beard as he queried. It's almost as if you came from there. I lived there for a period of time, Edith replied without a second thought, because of the agreement on the months of demons. What's that? Roland asked doubtfully. He seemed to have an impression of what it was, but could not recall the exact details of it. How can you not know? The young woman blinked in amazement. To help the church tide over the disasters during the months of demons, the four kingdoms had to dispatch troops to aid Hermes and fight alongside the Judgment Army. Your older brother, Gerald Wimbledon, was the commander of Greycastle's border troops. I've fought under him before. However, there seemed to be some mishaps over the past year. It's reported that the coalition of the four kingdoms has suffered many casualties, while the church's Judgment Army has suffered a similar loss. This is indeed so. Petrov corroborated what Edith said. My friend, René Med, completed his knight test in Hermes. Does every knight have to fight against demonic beasts before he can be granted his title? Roland looked towards Carter. Why haven't you mentioned this before? Ahem, this is a method that knights from small towns love to use. Carter shrugged his shoulders. The knightage of King City has its own rules for that. Apart from valiant combat, a knight's loyalty and knowledge are also very important considerations. These can't be proven simply by fighting against some evil creatures. By the way, Your Majesty. Edith did not refute Carter's words and instead turned to face Roland. May I inspect how your army fights in combat? I've always been curious as to how you managed to capture King City in just one day. If I can understand how the First Army operates, I may be able to contribute in future battles. This was not a big problem. There were no issues of secrecy. With the weaponry that the First Army now possessed, it was impossible to emulate their methods just by observing. As technology advanced, wars were becoming more and more expensive. Without a complete logistics supply system and industrial production support system, a batch of flintlocks would be utterly useless on its own. Furthermore, by displaying his military strength to the loyalists of the northern region, he could not only increase their confidence in him, but also deter them from having any secession ideas. As he thought about this, Roland nodded at Iron Axe and ordered, "Go and make arrangements for her." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Your Majesty, I suggest that you issue a decree, in the name of the king, to every city and town in Greycastle to expel their churches." Berev was unwilling to be outdone by Edith. Or else, when the war begins, the churches of these places will become strongholds from where they devour the whole kingdom. There aren't many lords who would happily do so. The church is typically a major source of tax revenue, and its power can be quite frightening. The lords prefer to follow the way that the wind blows. Edith shrugged her shoulders. This is also how the nobles usually act. In any case, it's better than not doing anything at all. The director glared at the young woman angrily. Of course. She laughed dismissively. The northern region will fully comply with this decree. Then we shall do that. Roland nodded in approval of Berev's idea. This could be a very difficult battle. Sylvie's facial expression seemed rather anxious. It's best that you inform Lady Tilly. The Sleeping Island witches may be able to assist you. As Roland listened to Sylvie, he could not help laughing bitterly in his heart. Sleeping Island's problems amounted to no less than his. He had still not heard back from them after sending out the intelligence regarding the Bloodfang Association. If Tilly brought her subordinates to aid him while their internal issues were still not resolved, Sleeping Island might fall into big trouble. However, this did not mean that Sylvie's words were senseless. Witches were indeed the most effective way of dealing with the pure witch and their uncanny abilities. I'll remember to write a letter to her, he replied. Don't forget to prepare God's stones of retaliation for your men. Agatha was next to chime in. Throughout the Union's centuries of existence, there have been several witches with inconceivable levels of ability. Any normal person who didn't wear a God's stone would have completely no resistance against them. One of these witches could easily take away the lives of thousands of people. Won't a flintlock or cannon work against them? Let's not even mention a witch like Nightingale, who can move close to your army easily. Some abilities already take effect by the time you see the witch. Roland was dumbstruck for a moment. The First Army, including its reserve forces, already comprised of 5,000 men. Where was he going to find so many God stones of retaliation? Even if he used witch blood to split the God stones into more pieces, he would not be able to produce a sufficient amount in such a short time. Your Majesty, you can try extorting these stones from the churches. Iron Axe suggested. If we only attack the church halls and believers, while not affecting the lives of civilians, even the nobles would not dare to oppose you openly. This way, we can fulfill Lord Barev's suggestion while also obtaining a large amount of God's stones for free. The corners of Barev's mouth arched into a grin. Do you mean we should send out the First Army to plunder the churches? We'll destroy the strongholds of the enemy, just like breaking off the fangs of a poisonous snake. The commander corrected Barev. This will also allow Miss Edith to observe the First Army engage in a real fight. Compared to a rehearsal, this would be much more informative. I also think so. Edith laughed in agreement. This is indeed killing many birds with one stone. Roland thumped the table emphatically. Let's call it the tooth extraction campaign.